No, 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 no. Hey, 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 goodbye. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. Hey, 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 goodbye. Come on, Rockfin. Na, 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 na. Na, 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 na. Hey, 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 goodbye. Yeah.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right, guys, welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. We do have our guest is waiting in the studio, so I do want to go ahead and show you the thumbnail so you know what we're going to be discussing tonight, and then we'll go ahead and bring Max in. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, of course, Max Blumenthal is here quite a bit to discuss, especially after Netanyahu was just here in DC on Monday. We're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss, this is interesting, AOC leads in new poll. Oh, buddy, what poll is that? Do you think that this is something that could actually happen in real life? We're going to get into that, ladies and gentlemen. We're also going to discuss Kamala Harris speaks out and the response has not been favorable. So we're going to get into her whole I told you so moment and what her former running mate, Tim Walz, has to say about that. We're also going to discuss, I'm finally going to talk about the story now that more information has been released, teen track meet uproar. We're going to get into the Carmelo Anthony story. And last but not least, China claps back at the U.S. I'm going to tell you how this could impact you. We know about the tariffs, but there's something else that has happened that has flown under the radar that I think people do not know about. And yes, you will be impacted. So we're going to go ahead and bring in our special guest, ladies and gentlemen. Let's welcome Max Blumenthal. Welcome back.
How's it going? Good to be back.
Great to see you. I know you are very, very busy, but a lot has happened I'd say the past week, particularly with foreign policy. And I want to show you this here. For those who are not aware, Benjamin Netanyahu was here to visit Donald Trump on Monday. And one of the things that is mentioned right in front of Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump here is speaking about Gaza as a new form of real estate. Listen to this.
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate. And I think it's something that we would be involved in. But, having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing. Because right now, all it is for years and years, all I hear about is killing and Hamas and problems. And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom zone. You call it the freedom zone, a free zone, a zone where people aren't going to be killed every day. That's a hell of a place. Well, you know how I feel.
Okay, so Max, I want to get your take on that there. I think Eric says your mic might be a little bit low, just FYI. But Donald Trump there talking about Gaza as a piece of real estate and possibly relocating Palestinian people. What's your take on that?
Well, this is completely in contravention to the America First principles as understood by the first wave of MAGA supporters who supported Donald Trump on the basis of his opposition to nation building. You know, they might have seen Arabs and Muslims in a kind of racist way, but they didn't want to get involved in their civil wars and involved in liberating them after the failures of Afghanistan and Iraq and all the damage, the moral damage to the country, but also just the physical injuries suffered by so many Americans on those battlefields. That Donald Trump spoke to that when he destroyed Jeb Bush in one of the first major Republican debates back in the 2016 primary. It was like a signal moment, a turning point for this country's politics. And now he's talking about the United States owning a property in the heart of the Arab world and basically taking it over and turning it into a freedom zone. I don't know how that happens without U.S. troops. It sounds more like Mogadishu, which didn't turn out very well for the U.S. Army, than it does Afghanistan. And for the Palestinians, it is sort of the capstone, or I should say the tombstone, on the Holocaust that we're witnessing day after day after day, which Trump has rubber stamped after greenlighting Netanyahu. So is Trump what he says here going to commit U.S. and to?
I think your mic is muffled, Max. It got muffled for a second.
Yeah, I don't know how it's muffled. It's the same setup I always have, so
it's fine now.
All right. Yeah. So I mean, does Trump really mean what he says? Well, we've seen in the past and early in this second administration that he's deployed a lot of maximalist extreme language against countries like Colombia or Mexico or Canada to try to create chaos and plunge them into crisis and then move as quickly as possible to get them into a deal on his terms. And it has worked in the past, but it's not working with Hamas. And it's not working with the broader panoply of Palestinian resistance factions because they've already suffered so much and they have so little to lose at this point. So they're not going to just surrender, give up their weapons, and then give up all their collateral and then let Israel move in and fulfill Donald Trump's plan. I don't know what the strategy is here. And if you played that clip for longer, you would just hear him lying persistently and maliciously about the history of the conflict. And then he hands over the mic to Netanyahu. He says, why don't you explain to everyone here to this press conference what the situation with Gaza is? And Netanyahu then lies shamelessly, like the biggest con artist you can imagine, saying Gaza was just blocked. but we had nothing to do with it. Gaza was blocked. And so what we want is to allow people from Gaza to go somewhere else. The Arabs won't let them be there. They won't let them go. And it is true that Egypt has partly participated in the siege of Gaza, but that has a lot to do with Israeli pressure on Egypt to do so. They don't want Palestinians flowing into Egypt who are war refugees, but Israel's the one who stole all the land of those refugees, making them refugees in the first place. Starting in 1948, Israel's the country that enacted the siege in 2005. Israel's created this entire crisis all the way up until October 7th, 2023. And so Trump and Netanyahu are just lying to the world in order to continue, like, keep the wheels of the Israeli Holocaust machine churning. And it's unclear where this will end up. But what Netanyahu is saying definitely has to be taken seriously. He's calling for voluntary migration. He wants ethnic cleansing. And you didn't hear a single critical question from the Washington press corps of Netanyahu in that press conference, when he is like the Hitler of our time, carrying out the most concerted, naked, and criminal ethnic cleansing project right before our eyes. It's being live streamed before everyone. The Washington press corps had no interest in questioning him about that. They were, it's a serious issue, the tariffs, but that's mainly what they wanted to talk to Trump about. And Trump's messaging just on Gaza it clearly was just coming from him, not from, I don't know if his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who's supposed to brief him before this, had any input at all. It was a real, like, the barbaric, crude display that is consistent with, at the same time, consistent with overall U.S. policy to Gaza, which has just created this catastrophe.
Max, when he says that we are going to send the Palestinian people somewhere else, where are they supposed to go?
Well, part of what Netanyahu has put forward is to send some of them to Somaliland, which is an imperial carve out from Somalia. And, when you create these kind of carve outs, these like abortions of countries out of conflict zones, then they're pretty desperate for cash. They're desperate for loans, and they'll do what you want. We can look at the, Rwanda under Paul Kagame as an example. Although it wasn't exactly a carve out of a country, Kagame is the West's favorite leader in probably on the whole African continent. And he was willing to accept tons of refugees and migrants who are kicked out of the UK in exchange for favorable loans. Nayib Bukele from El Salvador, who will do anything he can to curry favor with Donald Trump and the MAGA base, accepted not only migrants from the US, but legal immigrants to the United States who are falsely accused of being gang members, and essentially tortured them on camera, abused their rights on camera in a disgusting PR show for the Trumpist base, shaving their heads, holding them, like frog marching them on camera into one of the most brutal prisons in the Western Hemisphere, where many MS-13 members are housed in violation of a US court order. These are the leaders that are favored by the West because they help displace the crises created by the West and its real direct imperial partners. And so that's where they'll go. They'll go anywhere where some vassal will accept a deal. But the Egyptian vassal, Egypt has been a sort of a vassal state in a terrible financial crisis since it signed the Camp David deal with Israel in 1979. And, with that, surrendered its role as a sovereign, proud, independent leader of the Arab world, not just politically, but culturally, and accepted the whole neoliberal program of economics, became kind of a laboratory for neoliberal economics, shock therapy in the Middle East. Egypt, while it's pretty much given up its sovereignty, it still refuses to accept Palestinians, and it's a red line for a lot of complex reasons. But one reason is that it sees Palestinians as troublesome. They don't actually, the Egyptian leadership doesn't want them there. And then the Egyptian population, the grassroots, the regular people of Egypt stand in total solidarity with Palestine. So it destabilizes Egyptian society for Egypt's leadership, its junta led by Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, to do Israel such a ghastly favor and allow it to completely take over the Gaza Strip. So Israel's in a bind. Donald Trump's trying to work this out, and then there's the population of Gaza. These are people who've suffered through atrocities, crimes, deprivations that we can't even imagine. And they're still standing steadfast. Many of them do want to leave, understandably, but many of them are also seeking to stay in their homes or in the rubble of their homes because they understand that the fate of Palestine rests on their shoulders. And once they're pushed out, the West Bank will go next, and there will be nothing left in historic Palestine. After that, East Jerusalem, what's next? We're witnessing right now a real acceleration of a historical plan, which began in 1948, but it's simply something we could just call Greater Israel. And Israel is trying to realize as many of its goals as possible because it has Donald Trump and the Trump administration on lockdown. And Trump is giving them everything they want during this period. And that doesn't just pertain to Gaza or the West Bank. We're talking about Syria, where Israel is moving deep into the Golan Heights and has even moved into Druze towns in the Damascus suburbs and is seeking to hold that territory. We're talking about Israel attacking southern Lebanon and in southern Shia areas in southern Beirut in expectation probably of another war to eliminate Hezbollah and all resistance and force Lebanon to normalize relations with Israel, something the vast majority of Lebanese people oppose. And we're seeing Donald Trump issue a deadline, May 1st, for Iran to basically capitulate before the United States and give up all of its support for its allies in the region and render itself neutered, or face a U.S. bombing campaign where Trump has moved key U.S. Air Force and military assets into range of striking Iran, along with in-air refueling capacity and Ohio-class submarines with low-yield nuclear missiles equipped. And then the war in Yemen, which Donald Trump mentioned in his press conference, to destroy the Ansar Allah Houthi movement in order to allow Israeli shipping to proceed unmolested through the Red Sea. All of this is the Greater Israel agenda, and it can't be realized without its direct line to Donald Trump, and he's giving them everything they want.
This is incredibly true. And you mentioned Iran. So I want everyone to see this. Again, Benjamin Netanyahu was here Monday to meet with Donald Trump. This part right here in particular, someone got a close up of his face here. Trump's announced direct talks with Iran to avoid war. And I want you to see the look on Benjamin Netanyahu's face during this part of the discussion.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it. But it's getting to be very dangerous territory. And hopefully those talks will be successful. And I think it would be in Iran's best interest if they are successful. We hope that's going to happen. We're having direct talks with.
He does not, that close up, he does not look happy about that at all. I want to get your take on that.
Well, there were no direct talks of that kind under Biden, and Netanyahu believes that he should have veto power, and that he wasn't made aware that there would be direct talks, because just hours before Donald Trump said that, the Iranian foreign minister Araghchi announced that there would be only indirect talks in Oman, and that was the message he'd been sending. So for Netanyahu to not find out about this first was unusual for him, and it really speaks to the chaos that Trump causes, even for, I don't even want to call Israel an ally, but like the closest US proxies, Zelensky, Netanyahu. And at another point, he said, Netanyahu asked if Trump would drop the tariffs, and he said, we already give you $4 billion a year. So he actually rebuked Netanyahu. It was something we had never seen. We rarely see from a US president. I don't know what to expect from these talks, which are going to be held in Oman, but they're not going to be direct talks. That might have helped explain Netanyahu's expression. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen under Trump necessarily, but according to Iran, there will now be a meeting between Foreign Minister Araghchi and Steve Witkoff, who is Trump's negotiator, and they're going to be in Oman, and that's to see what's possible as far as indirect negotiations. So it's basically direct talks, but indirect negotiations through Oman, which is played this historic role as a regional negotiator. I know like Israel lobbyists in Washington who more align with Biden are very uncomfortable with Trump doing talks with Iran. Biden wasn't really willing to talk as directly or to put the whole nuclear issue on the table. And what Iran is demanding is very sensible, because look at what happened during the first Trump administration. He basically made a promise to his Zionist billionaire patrons, Sheldon and Miriam Adelson, that he would scrap the Iran deal. And so he tears up the JCPOA as one of the first things he does, and then imposes a policy of maximum pressure on Iran, which includes the assassination of Iran's second most powerful official, Qasem Soleimani. Iran wants Congress to authorize the deal, whatever deal it makes with Trump, and make it permanent so it can't be ripped up. And why would you deal with the United States when you have such an erratic political system that sends in one figure to make a deal with you, and then 4 years later, the next guy rips up the deal because he becomes a target of Israeli foreign influence? It doesn't make sense for Iran to do that. So they're seeking some stability here in negotiations, and I don't know if Trump will be able to deliver that. The other issue is something that Tucker Carlson pointed to in a very smart way, because he's trying to make the case to the Trump White House as someone who has direct access to Trump and Elon Musk and these other figures in the inner circle, that the United States would be insane to wage war in Iran. And he pointed to the tariffs and said, look at all the economic chaos that's happening now. Whether you think these tariffs are necessary or not, a war with Iran at this point would send the global economy into a kind of death spiral. Yep. And we can't have it right now. So I don't know if Trump is really prepared to push the button and execute the threat that he's made to Iran, but he's definitely gotten things to the table in Oman in a way we didn't expect. And I don't think Netanyahu's comfortable with it.
Well, he's not, because he issued this statement after that meeting. He's definitely not comfortable with it.
אני מסיים עכשיו ביקור שני בארצות הברית תוך חודשיים, ביקור חם מאוד עם ידידי הנשיא דונלד טראמפ. יכולתם להתרשם מהקרבה הגדולה והידידות הגדולה בינינו, והיא באה לידי ביטוי בנושאים שדיברנו. קודם כל איראן. אנחנו מסכימים שלאיראן לא יהיה נשק גרעיני. זה יכול לעשות בהסכם, אבל רק אם ההסכם הזה הוא הסכם נוסח לוב, שנכנסים, מפוצצים את המתקנים, מפרקים את כל המכשורים, בפיקוח אמריקני, בביצוע אמריקני, זה טוב. אפשרות שנייה, שזה לא יהיה, שהם סתם יגררו את השיחות, ואז האופציה היא צבאית. כולם מבינים את זה, על כך דנו באריכות. נושא שני שדיברנו עליו, זה עזה. אנחנו נחושים לחסל את החמאס, ואותה עת אנחנו נחושים להחזיר את כל חטופינו. והנשיא הסתכל עליי ואמר לכתבים שם, האיש הזה עובד כל הזמן כדי לשחרר את החטופים. אני מקווה שבזה הוא ניפץ את השקר שמופץ חדשות לבקרים, שאני לא עובד למענם, שלא אכפת לי. אכפת לי, ואני עושה את זה, ואנחנו גם נצליח בזה. וגם דיברנו על החזון של הנשיא טראמפ, כי אנחנו כרגע במגע עם מדינות שמדברות על האפשרות לקלוט הרבה מאוד עזתים. זה חשוב, כי בסוף זה מה שצריך להיות. הנושא השלישי, טורקיה. טורקיה רוצה להקים בסוריה בסיסים צבאיים, וזה סכנה לישראל. אנחנו מתנגדים לזה, פועלים נגד זה. אמרתי לנשיא טראמפ, שהוא ידיד שלי, גם ידיד של ארדואן, אם נצטרך את העזרה שלך, נדבר איתך על זה. והנושא הרביעי והאחרון, מכסים. הנשיא טראמפ ביקש מהמדינות להוריד את הגירעון הסחר שלהם, ארצות הברית, לאפס. אמרתי לו, זה לא כל כך קשה בשבילנו, נעשה את זה. זה המעט שאנחנו יכולים לעשות לארצות הברית ולנסיעה שעושים כל כך הרבה למעננו. זה היה ביקור מאוד טוב, ביקור מאוד חם, ויש גם דברים אחרים שתשמעו עליהם בהמשך.
So to wrap things up very quickly, one of the things that he said there was that there is no agreement with Iran unless they do denuclearize. In his mind, that's the only way that an agreement could happen. At the same time, if you're Iran, why would you give up your nuclear capability knowing that Israel still has that ability? Why would you give that up?
He's calling for them to destroy even their civilian reactors. I mean, they have one in Tehran that was actually U.S. made that's just providing energy. But Netanyahu doesn't want them to even have breakout capacity. And what he's calling for is the Libya option. And we know where that led for Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi trusted the West, which he had always denounced. Tony Blair negotiated the Libya option. He was Gaddafi's line to the West. He gave up all of his unconventional weapons, which were for deterrence to prevent an invasion. And he was left with a not very strong army. And then the West just decided to overthrow him by sponsoring Al-Qaeda mercenaries, along with the Gulf states that are actually kind of quietly assisting Israel, including Qatar. And, Turkey got in on the act. Everybody wanted a piece of the Libyan pie. They all ganged up on Gaddafi. He had no deterrence left. He called Tony Blair, his guy in London, and said, come on, I gave you everything you wanted. And now you're sending the dogs after me? Like, stop this now. And you're going to have a huge refugee crisis on your hand if you destabilize Libya, and will be overrun by ISIS. Gaddafi, Blair hung up the phone, said, sorry, buddy, nothing I can do for you. Gaddafi got a bayonet up his ass. He literally got bayoneted in the ass by Al-Qaeda goons under NATO air cover. Disgusting. And that tells you how good the West's word is when you give up all your deterrence. Someone who didn't and nuclearized was Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, who also had invested heavily in ballistic missile delivery devices to make sure that if he had nuclear capacity, he could deliver it to United States assets in the Pacific Ocean. And he made good on that. And what did he get? He got a personal visit from Donald Trump walking across the demilitarized zone from South Korea, attempting to negotiate. Of course, Donald Trump's peace on treaties, his peace attempt, which I thought was courageous, was deep-sixed by the deep state, John Bolton and company. But it really shows the value of having a nuclear program in today's dog-eat-dog world. And for Iran to give up even breakout capacity, as you mentioned, against a country that has a nuclear weapons program, at least 250 nuclear weapons that we know of, at a plant in Dimona that is exempted from IAEA inspections, that really would have to be that would be suicidal. The other terms that the West and Israel behind them is putting on the table for Iran are also suicidal. Giving up their ballistic missile program, blocking the IRGC from being able to support allies in Yemen and Lebanon, which play an important role in giving Iran strategic depth. Iran's not going to be able to agree to those. And so the pressure is building. What Israel's really demanding is the destruction of the Iranian state as a revolutionary force. And their ultimate goal is to get someone like the Shah back in there. And this will lead to deep social crisis in Iran and the region. And that's the price of supporting a tiny little apartheid entity like Israel. It doesn't serve U.S. interests to do this. So, you had Trump in North Korea negotiating. Yeah, there were some other forces that sabotaged the negotiations, but it didn't lead to war. Here you have Trump and Iran negotiating, but you have this third force, which is deeply integrated into the global financial system and holds sway over U.S. Congress, U.S. state houses, and has close relationships with U.S. intelligence and the U.S. military, talking about Israel. That doesn't portend well for the negotiations. And I'm really troubled about the prospect of war here. And just finally, Netanyahu touched on Turkey and Syria. This is a new great game that's worth paying attention to. And Turkey is in a state of turbulence now with massive protests against Erdogan. There are deals that Turkey is making with the Kurds for the first time in a while, I think, to safeguard its near abroad. And at the same time, Turkey is arming and supporting the rebranded al-Qaeda government in Syria of Ahmed al-Shara, aka Mohammed al-Jolani. And Israel's trying to make sure that Jolani, who is basically an agent of Turkey at this point, of Erdogan, is as weak as possible. And so Israel's just attacked the T4 military airport and base outside Homs. And that previously was an Iranian IRGC. That was a base where Iran would deliver military assets and support the Syrian military. Now Turkey has started moving in. And so Israel totally destroyed the base. And it's a message to Turkey, like, we will attack you next if you begin to strengthen and fortify this new Syrian kind of Muslim Brotherhood aligned government. I mean, how far can Israel go? It's fighting on, I can't even keep track of how many fronts, 5 to 7, but it's really pushing for war on so many fronts. And I don't know how long Trump can afford to keep this relationship going before he breaks and says, wait a minute, Netanyahu's asking too much of me. I'm going to have to eventually say no.
What's stopping Israel from going into Iran? I mean, this is insane at this point. It's like they're trying to go against anybody, particularly in that region, that doesn't support the greater Israel. And I mention Iran because when Netanyahu came to Congress, I believe it was the last time, he had 2 pictures in his hand. And one he called the curse and the other one he called the blessing. And he said that the curse was Iran. And he showed the other map and he said, this could be the blessing where we can have trade go from Europe to the Middle East, etc. This is what we could have, but we have this curse that's in the way. And that curse, he said, was Iran. So if they do proceed to, let's say, take over Gaza and then the West Bank, what's stopping them from going to Iran?
Well, that visual display was for the region, the blessing and the curse. And Netanyahu is, I mean, it's an invocation of the Bible, and Netanyahu is positioning himself as God. He's basically saying, I'm God of the region. And if you side with Iran, like Ansar Allah in Yemen or Hezbollah in Lebanon, you will be cursed and you will be destroyed by God. If you side with Israel, which basically controls the U.S. government, you will be blessed. And that's the blessing is the Abraham Accords. And the kind of sellout Sunni monarchies of the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, which are basically glorified oil companies posing as states, have sided with the blessing there. They believe that, once they get the Palestinian issue out of the way, we'll be blessed, we'll make peace. There are still other people in the region who have dignity and are actually standing up against a force that is telling them what they can do with their future and what kind of political system they can have, who can be their leader and who will be assassinated. They're basically fighting for their own freedom. And outside of Gaza being a besieged area where most people are Sunni, outside of there, most of those forces are Shia, and they are all targets. They are targets, and they're not just for the last 10, 15 years, they haven't just been targets of Israel. They've been targets of these Takfiri, extremist, Al-Qaeda and ISIS proxies that have just slaughtered every minority group in their wake. And that's what we're seeing take place in Syria, where since Assad was removed, the new government of Ahmad al-Sharaz conducted a genocidal campaign against the Alawites from a Shia offshoot. And Israel's pretty content to see that take place. As long as Muslims are killing each other, that's fine for them. And the Syrian state, to the extent it still exists, has been powerless to resist Israel's onslaught and seizure of its territory, something that wasn't happening before. So that's the blessing and the curse is an ominous message Netanyahu was sending throughout the region. And it's clear, increasingly clear, who's on Israel's side and who's still fighting for sovereignty. Why doesn't Israel attack Iran? Israel on its own obviously doesn't have the capacity to attack Iran. Netanyahu's life mission, at least since he returned to office, to the prime minister's office in 2009, has been to manipulate and push the United States into attacking Iran on his behalf. That's why in his first major speech before Congress after returning to the prime minister's office, this is the Obama administration, Netanyahu held up another visual display and it was of Auschwitz radar, like satellite or maps filmed from a blimp of Auschwitz. And he said the United States failed to attack the railways to Auschwitz. And then he held up another satellite Maxar map of Iran's nuclear facilities, the facility at Natanz, I think. And he said, will you make the same mistake now and fail to bomb the new engines of the Jewish people's destruction in Iran? And this was a message to Obama. Like, if you fail to do this, you are an anti-Semite and you will be cursed. And that's where he's trying to get Trump right now. And Trump is moving into position to do exactly what Netanyahu wants. The Diego Garcia Air Base in the Indian Ocean has 1/3 of the U.S. entire fleet of B-2 stealth bombers, along with attack aircraft for support, F-18s, and in-air refueling jets. That's all they need to attack the nuclear facilities of Iran, which are buried deep underground. And they put them at Diego Garcia because it's supposedly out of range of Iran's ballistic missiles. But Iran can do a lot. If it's not caught on the back foot, it can attack oil facilities across the Persian Gulf, tank the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz, it can just cut it off. I mean, it can basically cut off shipping in a way that Ansar Allah and Yemen can't. And it can place Trump in real political danger just by doing that. And then there are U.S. bases across Iraq and across the region that can be reached by the ballistic missiles. So, there could be a real price here. So for the U.S. to do Israel's bidding could lose a lot of U.S. soldiers.
So we could be potentially looking at another proxy war.
Proxy war, where we're the proxy for Israel.
It's just and I point to this because people need to see this, you guys. Again, here's another one. All of this happened on Monday, by the way. The defense budget, he is going to increase. You guys need to hear this.
But despite that, we have a tremendous military. That was a very small portion because we rebuilt the military during my first term, and we have great things happening with our military. We also essentially approved a budget which is in the facility. You'll like to hear this, of $1 trillion, $1 trillion, and nobody's seen anything like it. We have to build our military, and we're very cost conscious, but the military is something that we have to build, and we have to be strong because you got a lot of bad forces out there now. So we're going to be approving a budget, and I'm proud to say, actually, the biggest one we've ever done for the military. We're cutting other things that were under Doge, but under a lot of other. When you look at a woman getting $2 billion for environmental, and it had nothing to do with environmental, and they had $100 in the bank, and they give her $2 billion. Many of those cases, all that stuff is going to be cut out.
So the point that I want to address here is the fact that he's trying to increase the military budget to $1 trillion. And the number of times that they tell us, our government tells us, we don't have the money to pay for everybody to have universal health care in this country. But they want to increase the military budget to $1 trillion. Don't forget, people, when Donald Trump was running, remember he said, oh, we're going to cut the defense budget. And I was like, yeah, we'll wait and see if that actually happens. Right. So obviously not. Yeah, they laid off federal employees. People lost their jobs, but they're increasing the military budget. Like this is insane, especially considering most people nowadays are not joining the military. I mean, military recruitment is down. So it's just giving Netanyahu everything he wants.
Well, first and most obviously, if you're going to have $1 trillion military budget, it's already like $800 billion. Biden kept raising it. We have to go back to the comment Secretary of State Madeleine Albright made as the U.S. began destroying Yugoslavia through a fake humanitarian intervention, which was really just an imperial war. You're not, if you have such a, how can you have, she basically said, how can you have the world's biggest army and not use it? And it was considered shocking at the time when she said that. But that's the logic here. If there's $1 trillion military budget, they're going to have to gin up some fake wars. And they're already in Yemen. What have they done there? Nothing. They've achieved no military goals. They've committed lots of war crimes, blown up apartment buildings. They blew up a tribal gathering. It was like the collateral murder WikiLeaks video that Trump and Pete Hegseth blasted out of them bombing a bunch of men having what's known as a majlis, or a meeting in a kind of circle. It's like basically their version of a city council meeting. They just blew it up, killed everybody. We don't need WikiLeaks to expose it because these maniacs are proud of it. They have not achieved freedom of navigation, which is the objective of this war, for ships going through the Red Sea. They have not reduced the cost of shipping. They have not weakened Houthi leadership. They have not taken out any high-level targets. We still don't know the name of the top missile guy that Mike Walz referred to that they killed on the first day of the war in his Signalgate chat without knowing that Jeffrey Goldberg, one of the top antagonists of the Trump administration, was in the chat. These people are idiots. Pete Hegseth, they talk about DEI picks. The defense secretary is a DUI pick. This guy is a historic level clown. And they have wasted already close to $1 billion of our money on this war of choice because they just have endless money to play with. They're testing new weapons. Trump has promised Boeing this gigantic grift to build the B-47 stealth bomber. It will be the most expensive aircraft in history by by far more expensive than the B-2. And what they did to get the B-2 bomber built, which is totally unnecessary, is they would build a different part for it in every American state. So every member of Congress would be so compromised and need the job so badly that they couldn't vote against the appropriations for that bomber. And that's what they're going to do with the B-47. And then they're tying in all these new deals. Trump is going to give Anduril, the company of venture capitalist Mark Andreessen, who became one of his supporters, a deal to build integrated drone support for the B-47. So the B-47 will be able to supposedly control a fleet of attack drones. How is that going to happen? It just seems like they're taking all of the money from our pockets and feeding it into one of the only productive parts of the U.S. economy, which is the arms industry and its big tech and AI. And then they're cutting entitlements, which basically means social programs for regular people who are going to be de facto taxed by Trump's tariffs, and eliminating their jobs and calling government workers villains to try to claim that they're reducing the budget. And Elon Musk is lying left and right about finding all of this waste through Doge, condom money for condoms in Gaza, completely made up. And so, I mean, what are you looking at here? Kind of like looks like fascism. I hate to use that word because it's kind of like lost all meaning. But when you're left with nothing more than this gigantic military and a military grift, and there's practically no social programs, I mean, it's just basically we're just living in a giant war state.
Some people who did vote for Donald Trump are speaking out against this. Not most that I've seen so far, but some of them are speaking out. Some have been more vocal about what is this? It seems like it's Israel first, not America first, especially after the tariffs, right? So some people are like, whoa, what is happening here, right? And that brings up this question that people are now floating around. And I wanted to ask you about this. If Kamala Harris wins, how do you think she handles this situation with Benjamin Netanyahu? Because she told us over and over again, she still would not withhold weapons from Israel. So where do you think this goes if Kamala would have won? Because I don't see her saying no to Netanyahu either.
I don't think there would have been a ceasefire in the first place. She would have been steamrolled by Netanyahu. Trump had the ability to ink a ceasefire deal because of his relationship with Netanyahu, because Netanyahu sort of trusted him and wanted to give him a win to justify him being elected. And Trump at the same time gave Netanyahu the West Bank, said just go crazy, annex it, whatever. Kamala would have still spouted bromides about a two-state solution, but there wouldn't have been no ceasefire. She never would have exercised any leverage there. And it was up to Donald Trump to enforce the ceasefire, but he greenlit Netanyahu breaking it and slaughtering over 80 children in 1 hour after breaking the ceasefire. And now here we are with hostages in Gaza. Actually, I think they might be more like prisoners of war, Americans who went to fight with the Israeli military in Gaza. And they're still there, languishing, suffering the same conditions everyone else in Gaza is. So they're famished. And this is Donald Trump's failure. Looking at, I'm sure Kamala would have similarly failed. It would to stop Netanyahu really requires something extreme in U.S. politics. You have to defy the most powerful lobby in American life, the Israel lobby, by doing what Bernie Sanders is calling for now, which is suspending arms shipments to Israel. It's the only way to stop them. And then who knows what they'll do to you.
Right.
I don't think Kamala would have done that, but Donald Trump, he did have a ceasefire deal. He didn't enforce it. He had momentum to negotiate also a deal between Ukraine and Russia. And that seems to be, I wouldn't say abandoned, but it's lost all momentum. And it may completely fail. And he's threatening war with Iran. There could, for all we know, be a war in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And he's launched a war for Israel in Yemen, which has completely failed just from a purely military standpoint, which may very well lead to a ground invasion by the sellout Sunni monarchies of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, with possible support from Qatar, and the fake Yemeni government in the south, which currently exists in an apartment building in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with US air support, which would be grisly and horrendous. That will be, just in the first 6 months of Trump's administration, one of the most catastrophic foreign policy records that we thought Biden was the worst, but Trump is really giving him a run for his money. And then the other thing that's that I find kind of funny in a way, since you mentioned people now having second thoughts or buyer's remorse about Trump, is the capitalist class that supported Trump, the 0.1 percenters like Bill Ackman of Pershing Capital, who supported Trump because he was going to jail pro-Palestine professors. Bill Ackman is a Jewish supremacist to the extreme, and he pulled his money out of Harvard because the president, Claudine Gay, wouldn't jail all the students who protested the genocide. And Bill Ackman comes in and he's like, Donald Trump is pro-Wall Street. It's going to be a pro-growth administration. Then Trump does what he says he was always going to do, which is impose global tariffs. And Bill Ackman starts losing his money. Billionaires are losing a lot of money right now. And Bill Ackman's like, no, we need a ceasefire. It's the first time I've ever heard him call for a ceasefire. But he only calls for a ceasefire when it concerns his own money, not thousands of dead babies. He's fine with that. They're all freaking out. Donald Trump is actually willing to face down a large slice of the global capitalist class, but he can't face down Netanyahu. So that really should speak volumes about where the power lies.
And now we see the crimes have come back home, which is what I think a lot of us were warning people. We're seeing students get deported or in the process of being deported because they participated in pro-Palestinian protests, people being jailed. It's absolutely insane. But again, to your point, that's what Bill Ackman wanted, right? Didn't he wanted the crackdown on those protesters. And that brings up Mahmoud Khalil, because he was the first one I think that a lot of us heard about that was detained by ICE. And Roger Meadows, friend of the show, he sent me this article, and I wanted to ask you about this. Did you hear anything about this article that said that Mahmoud Khalil may have been British intelligence? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I am. I talked about it with Jackson Hinkle when he asked me about it. Just to address overall your comment before I get to that, Trump and the Trump administration is going to screw over his own base. I mean, Democrats, people on the left are used to getting screwed over by the Democratic Party. He's moving towards reducing their Medicare payments, taking their Social Security accounts, or reducing Social Security payments. They're starting to worry. And so what he's giving them is a kind of sadistic, almost pornographic theater of vengeance, blood vengeance, and humiliation of their perceived enemies among the poor and underclass. Of course, there won't be any vengeance against the real enemies, their class enemies. And so we see Kristi Noem, who's this poster woman, sadistic MILF dominatrix fantasy for the Trumpist male, standing in front of shirtless Salvadoran alleged MS-13 members bearing tattoos packed into a prison cell, and she's wearing a Rolex watch, wearing her little DHS cap, and she's just posing there. It looks like the cover of some demented 90s bukkake movie. And then today she was out with Chaya Raichik, the crazy libs of TikTok Chabad cult member, Twitter influencer, supposedly arresting gang members in Phoenix. Again, she's out with her MILF dominatrix look, rounding up Latino males into a van with this demented Twitter influencer who spends days and days just staring at drag shows. Like, I don't know how you can spend that much time watching like the drag shows that you say are so evil and not be a little bit off yourself. You seem pretty fixated on it. It just shows like a level of cultural perversion that might be like hard to understand, but that is what they're giving their base in exchange for their base giving up all material benefits that they received from the post-New Deal order. And that's what they voted for. That's what many of them voted for. They're just going to sit there on their screens and watch Latino males get abused and like it, and then they'll type in replies, deport them all. Like I always see that reply now. I don't care. Deport them all. Deport everyone. They're entertaining this fantasy of a country just without everyone they hate. And not to say that there wasn't a real immigration crisis or a real warped economy based on globalization in this country, but they're not going to respond to that in any real way. I don't actually think they're going to get away with real mass deportations that will empower the American worker. Although the Trump administration is giving Geo Group and these privatized prison firms something like $50 billion to build new prison infrastructure to house migrants. It's just a giant giveaway, like corporate welfare giveaway to big donors among this booming industry, which is the only source of jobs in so many towns across Arizona and elsewhere. And then, so the anti-Semitism issue is plugged into this. The Palestine protester that's wearing hijab, Mahmoud Khalil, they're all seen in the same light as the Venezuelan migrant, and they all need to be deported. But they're not all going to be deported. They're not going to be able to shut down protest. They are certainly going to move towards criminalizing it, but they're not going to get away with it immediately. So what they need to do is have high-profile busts of prominent figures and pull their green cards and pull their student visas. Mahmoud Khalil was like the test case, the first one. And I think they probably should have chosen someone else because Mahmoud Khalil was a permanent resident who has this background that you mentioned of actually being a British soft power asset who worked for the British embassy in Beirut, helping, I mean, he wasn't like some high level figure. I think he was just like an ambitious young man who was raised in a Syrian refugee camp, Yarmouk, which, before the dirty war on Syria was for Palestinian refugees, a comparatively better place to live than in Lebanon. He wanted to get out and be a part of the world. And he spoke English and, this was his way out. The British brought him into the embassy in Beirut, but what the British were doing in Beirut was horrible. I mean, they were working to destroy the resistance there, Hezbollah. They were infiltrating. He worked on regime change issues related to Syria. He received a Chevening Scholarship, which is a British soft power scholarship that trains young people from around the world to like basically advance British interests. And then he went to Columbia's SIPA school, the School of International and I think Public Affairs or Policy Affairs. Who are faculty at SIPA? Hillary Clinton is teaching there now. Victoria Nuland. I mean, it's an imperial training school. And then the genocide starts on October 7th, 2023, or October 8th. And protests break out at Columbia. Columbia has a very high percentage of students from the Middle East who are stand in solidarity with Palestinians, and students from the US, including Jewish students who are anti-Zionist. And the protests intensify there. And Mahmoud Khalil emerges with this whole background and all the training he has as a key negotiator between the administration and the students, and proved very effective. And that's how his name became known to Zionists. And that's why they began targeting him. So I called up the British Foreign Office's press department and asked them if they had anything to say about Khalil being kidnapped, since they had trained him and, worked with him. And, if you're going to work in the British embassy in Beirut, they're going to vet you. Like Marco Rubio's basically calling this guy a terrorist. I said, are you going to come out and say he's not a terrorist? You worked with him. He's a good, upstanding young man with a strong moral compass. Like, can you say anything? And they said, just send your questions by email. I sent them by email. No response. The British Foreign Office has thrown him under the bus. And so, like, it's such a tragic story. And I think when you ask that question, it gets to one of the angles of the story that a lot of his supporters don't want to acknowledge, but which I think says so much about Western empire, which is that you can serve it, you can deal with them as an ally, but as soon as you start to carve out your own space, or the native demands his own dignity, they just kick you to the curb. They abandon you completely. And Mahmoud Khalil has been betrayed, and I guess is now he's in a prison somewhere in New Jersey and can only speak through his lawyer. He's been silenced after being disappeared.
This is insane. I have one more question here, Max, and that is, again, about what's happening here at home. We are also seeing that even when it comes to Hollywood, Israel is not winning the narrative, because we look at the two movies that did not perform well, that I think were predicted to perform well. The Snow White movie with Gal Gadot, like, even though she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, although I question that very, very heavily, because I know that there have been people who have been actors it took them 20 years before they could receive a star. So you got to question that. But then also the Captain America movie, which also there were a lot of protests against that, because it did feature, I guess, the introduction of one of the characters from the Marvel comics, which is an agent superhero for the Mossad or something like that. And what we saw is that there was great backlash, not just from the protesters, but even with the ticket sales. Snow White did not do well at all. In fact, it flopped. Captain America, when you compare it to all the other Marvel movies, flopped. So I don't think that in the end, Israel is going to win the narrative. And I'm curious to what you think about that. I think that it's over for them when you look at their reputation. I don't think that they could ever clean up that reputation.
It's a complex issue. I think Snow White flopped because it sucked. Overall, it just sucked. I think a lot of people on the right might not have wanted to see it because Snow White wasn't a pureblood white girl. I saw a lot of objection to that. But we have a story up at the Gray Zone by Wyatt Reed about one of the major faces of Israel's post-October 7th PR efforts. His name is Rami Davidan, and he claimed that he rescued 750 Israelis from Hamas on October 7th, and that he witnessed like dozens of Israeli women tied to trees after being brutally sexually assaulted by Hamas. And he was just about to be exposed on a major Israeli network in Israel, Channel 13, by their top investigative journalist, Raviv Drucker, as a complete fraud who invented every single story. And then the CEO of the network comes in and pulls the report under public pressure, supposedly. They can't really expose this hero. But the guy, he's been on international speaking tours, and he was in Sheryl Sandberg's hoax movie about Hamas mass rape on October 7th. And I just thought to myself, this guy is a much better actor than Gal Gadot. I mean, she's a terrible actor. Have you seen it? Or like, just historically, I just wondered, how did she even get these roles? And I guess it's just, she's like a 6 foot tall Israeli model, and Hollywood producers like that. That didn't help either. But Israel's PR efforts are, they often work during periods of shock, like October 7th. Like, they got the whole media to believe anything they wanted, and they're willing to lie in order to achieve a genocidal objective. The 40 beheaded babies hung on laundry lines, Hamas mass rape, the whole thing. They got the whole media to believe that for months, and they carved out all the political space they needed to commit genocide. By the time the lies were exposed, it was too late. and much of the media was too embarrassed to walk them back. But then you have like the propaganda set pieces where they try to plant their people in Hollywood, generate sympathy through Hollywood films. The public in the US is not interested in that. It's not going to go anywhere. They've basically lost the culture, and in a generation, they will have lost US public opinion outside of parts of the political right. There are polls, YouGov polls, Pew polls showing most Democrats do not support Israel, and in fact oppose it. That's just only going to intensify. Their only base of support is among older Republicans right now. And, if you poll Jewish Americans, most of them will identify as Zionists, but the depth of the intensity for Israel it's not that strong, except within religious communities that are sort of hermetic and are like the 5 towns in Long Island. But like secular Jewish Americans, they're not going to grow up with like this deep love for the right-wing Israel that is just waging war on all fronts. So where does it go? I mean, the Israeli Foreign Ministry has a $150 million fund right now to pay influencers. One of them, I believe, is Van Jones, who's just become like one of the biggest sellouts I've ever met in my life. I knew him when he was trying to be like a green activist, but before that he was a Maoist in the Bay Area. And now he's like appearing in Israeli propaganda videos with Noah Tishby, who's one of the Israeli government's main cultural influencers. And he's speaking at Israeli fundraisers. Who else do they have out there? Like Michael Rappaport, clearly part of this. Deborah Messing, who has this dumb AstroTurf October hate film demonizing the Palestine Solidarity Movement. No one's really watching it. It's all AstroTurfed. They're influencers, the celebrities they're able to buy they're not even B-listers. Like, who was Michael Rappaport before October 7th? So and by the way, they had to raise taxes on Israeli citizens to pay for that $150 million fund. So where is this all leading? They're not going to win some cultural war. They're not putting forward they're not even trying to convince anyone anymore. They're just going to win through force. They're going to win by paying politicians like John Fetterman, who was instrumental in Mahmoud Khalil's kidnapping, by carrying out AI genocides in the region. And, you have these kind of hooligan squads like Beitar, the Shirion Collective, digital hooligan squads like Canary Mission. They're just there to intimidate American citizens, and they think that they can win through force alone, that they can just criminalize us, destroy the First Amendment, and bomb their way out of every problem. And if they succeed, then what's left of civilization? Civilization is gone. And so those are the stakes.
Max Blumenthal, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me. Thanks for all the great questions. And special thanks to Eric T. Red, Eric Thomas, your producer, for all the hard work he's done for us, helping to moderate the chat at the Gray Zone.
Awesome. Thanks, Max.
See you soon.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Max Blumenthal. And yes, we do have to give a shout out to Eric, who's in the background, my producer. Eric does a lot of work, not just producing here, but also helping them over at the Gray Zone. Also, Eric, this past weekend, we started filming that documentary. I told you guys we're making a documentary. So we started filming over the weekend. We've wrapped up the filming. So now it's just the editing piece, which is probably going to take the longest. But look for that documentary to be published sometime in May, because like I said, I got a lot going on. But the editing, I think, is going to take the longest. So look for that there. I do want to go ahead and make sure I shout out Super Chats. We also want to give a shout out to patrons, and we'll dive into other stories, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash the like button. Thank you very much. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. We will do call in tonight after the show. If you haven't had a chance, also answer that poll question. And it's totally fine if you're not sure yet. I'm going to go into a little bit more information about that incident that happened in Texas tonight. So I think some of you may not want to answer until we get to that story. So I totally understand that too. But another thing that I am going to do at the end of the show tonight, something that I want to address for maybe the third time on this show, I will be addressing that again. But I will forewarn you that you need to be very careful about who you interact with online. And I'll explain more of that later on in the show, and we can talk more about that on call in as well. So, all right, let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much. Doing the damn thing. All right. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories here. Ultimate Sabinators. Don't forget about Sabsters. They're pretty cool too. I think they are, at least. There's also Sabbies. Yes. And don't forget, we also have members. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen throughout the show. And I want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Let's give it up for them. We call them newbies. Shout out to Lillian Colby and Roo. Kind of like that, Roo. Sounds like the name of a band. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate all of your support, fam. Hey. Thank you. And tonight's theme, ladies and gentlemen, is 2 sides of the story. And we'll get into all of that. You'll be able to put it together with the different stories, of course. And we're going to go ahead and go to some of the comments here. Shout out to May, who's been a member for 3 months, says, considering this evening's poll, I was wondering what the size difference was between Carmelo and his victim. He was 5'11", 160. Metcalf was 6'1", 225. That's interesting, May. Krista says, hi, Sabby. I was wondering if you believe that the Democrats will be able to reverse Trump's horrible policies if they win in 2026 and 2028. Also, I hope you're having a wonderful day. It all depends who controls the Senate, because if the Dems win in the House, but they don't win those seats in the Senate, which I don't think that's going to happen in 2026. I mean, the Senate seats, it's 6-year term. So some of those Republicans that just won in 2024, they're going to be there for at least 6 years, right? So if they don't win the Senate, I don't know. I just don't see the Democrats as really trying to, I don't know, man. I feel like they wait for things to happen, and then they say, oh no, we got to prevent that from happening again. But I just feel like the tough part is going to be the Senate. And if they don't control the Senate, I don't know. I honestly don't know. They don't seem like they're really fighters to me. Some of them want to fight. Most of them, I think, don't. Ali says, hello, Sabby. Anything new with the Boston sex scandal? I don't know what this is about. Someone was asking me about this earlier, and I was like, sex scandal? So I have to look into that. Interesting. Free speech, tariff on China up 130%. What could that mean in future for your companies like Apple? History, cause over price. We're actually going to get into that a little bit with the China story. Thank you, Peter, the Gray Zone hosts, Aaron Buzzsaw, and Mad Max. Thank you, Charlie. Maxon for the win. Thank you, Lordell, who has gifted 5 Sabby memberships. Thank you so much. Shout out to Teddy, says, if Iran don't make agreement with the U.S., do you see World War III? I would say possibly. Unless like Donald Trump is going to tell Benjamin Netanyahu no. And I just don't see him telling him no. Like, it's going to get wild, guys. Buckle up. Thank you, Peter. How many fronts? The head of the Hydra multiplies. Thank you, me. I remember learning in an international relations class back in college from a Vietnamese professor The only way to deter conflict is to not be weak. Iran needs deterrence. Interesting. N3N said, Sabby, you should invite the Trump supporters you had on and ask them about all of these decisions made by Trump. Yeah, I should, huh? Some of them have reached out to me privately and they're not happy, but I should do. That's a good point. Thank you, Tim. Is socialism for them billionaires and ultra capitalism for you American people? Privatize the gains and socialize the losses. They play in our faces. Yes, they do. And thank you, Kevin. Hegseth says China poses threat to the Panama Canal. Yeah, it's always somebody else who's the threat. It's never the United States, right? Always somebody else. Oh my God. Let's get the comment on Rockfin. Thank you, Roger. I'm going to keep saying it till I'm blue in the face. And since I'm black, that means I'll never be blue. But put the Zios on a boat, ship them to Antarctica, rename it Israel, drop their asses off there and let climate change take over. Damn, Roger. Every time we talk about what Max just spoke about, we have to mention TAG. Yes, TAG is Taxpayers Against Genocide. Start suing your Congress members and senators for violating Leahy regarding Khalil. I took that as a yes from Max. I don't think Max knows that when he asked, how did Godot get that far, being a terrible actress is not what you know, but it's who you, it's not what you know, but it's who you know or who you blow. Oh my God. Max mentioned Five Towns, Small World, Hewlett, Cedarhurst, Woodmere, Inwood, Lawrence. That's super. We're not going to say that on here, Roger, but I get what you're saying. A lot of millionaires living in mansions on SNAP and welfare. MC searched third base from there. Not too far from Long Beach, where Rick Rubin of Def Jam, another Zionist. Wow. I guess you learn something new every week. I can't believe he said who you blow. Oh my God. Okay, guys, let's move on to the other stories, other news stories. We will have call in tonight after the show, so stay tuned for that. The theme again is two sides of the story. So we're going to get started with the story here about the poll that was just released about AOC. This is really interesting. You know, AOC's on that tour with Bernie Sanders. They're doing the oligarchy tour, traveling to certain cities in the United States. And there's been a lot of pressure coming from those who I guess are more part of the progressive side of the Democratic Party, who are really upset with Chuck Schumer. Even some of those who are not progressives, that are not politicians, have been very angry towards Chuck Schumer for choosing to go along and vote for that GOP funding bill. And people are still being vocal about that. Well, when that started, people were starting to ask, should AOC challenge Chuck Schumer for that Senate seat? And she was one of the people that said she does not agree with what Chuck Schumer did. She came out publicly on corporate media and said that. And so people are saying we need people that can fight. Although I would say there's been a number of times when AOC caved to Democrat leadership. I think we all remember all of that. We went through all of that. But look at this new poll. Politico. AOC leads Schumer in head-to-head New York primary matchup by double digits. The liberal group Data for Progress conducted the survey of likely Democratic voters. So this poll is very telling, because what this poll is showing you is that according to the people who responded to that poll, they want Chuck Schumer to resign. They want Chuck Schumer to step down. Here's the problem. Chuck don't want to step down. Chuck Schumer doesn't want to resign. He made it very clear. He's like, no, we're fighting. We're in there fighting every day. He's not. He's not. But they want him out. They want him out. And people are starting to ask, is this now the Tea Party moment that people thought was going to happen when Justice Democrats was created? People are being more vocal. However, at the end of the day, what really matters is going to be the donor and lobby interest groups. Now, AOC runs grassroots campaigns, so she doesn't take money from AIPAC. She doesn't take money from any of these Israel lobby, like interest groups, anything like that. She doesn't take money from Big Pharma, but Chuck Schumer does. And I'll tell you why that's important if this race were to actually become a thing, okay? Now let's go on. AOC is leading Chuck Schumer by double digits in a new head-to-head poll. The survey, which was done by the liberal firm Data for Progress, it shows that 55% of Democrat likely voters said they supported or leaned towards supporting AOC, while 36% backed or leaned towards Chuck Schumer. 9% were undecided. Now, look, I have plenty of criticism for both of these people, okay? I've criticized both of them. But Chuck is losing by double digits. According to this poll, if that Senate race election were today, Chuck would most likely lose. Except one reason that I think it wouldn't happen. Well, two. Number one, I'm not quite convinced that AOC wants to run against Chuck Schumer. So there's that. Two, the Zionist lobbies. Remember that story I told you about Hakeem Jeffries, and I told you how he was losing in the polls when he was running for that congressional seat that he currently holds? He was losing to Charles Barron. Charles Barron was a Black Panther. He was winning in those polls. And so obviously, like the Zionist, like lobby groups, AIPAC, they did not want someone like Charles Barron to get that seat because he was not going to vote on legislation that would benefit the interests of Israel. So what they did was they poured lots of money into Hakeem Jeffries' race, and then they started a smear piece against Charles Barron, which said that David Duke endorsed Charles Barron. Now, come on, people. You would think people use their brains. Why would David Duke actually endorse a Black candidate? Come on. I mean, he's a white supremacist. Why would he do that? Unless he's also opposition. He did the same thing when Jill Stein was running just recently in 2024. David Duke always comes out to issue these endorsements when it's someone that is running that has been critical of what Israel is doing. And I want people to understand that's a trap. That's a trap, okay? So without that money interest, Charles Barron would have won that seat. So the money came in, just like AIPAC money came in to go against Nina Turner. So what I would predict would happen if AOC does run against Chuck Schumer. Number one, I do not think Chuck Schumer is going to resign. He's too hard-headed. And also he made it very clear that he is there to make sure that the left stays pro-Israel. That's his assignment. That's what he's supposed to do while he's in the Senate. You lose him and you put AOC in that spot, then it's like, oh, wait a minute. This is someone who doesn't take money from AIPAC. And that's not what they want. Now, to be fair, she did host a webinar where she conflated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. That's why AIPAC didn't put up money against her to get her out of that seat the same way they did towards Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, because she was willing to bend the knee just a little bit. That got her a lot of backlash from DSA, just FYI. But I don't think Chuck Schumer is going to step down. And I think that AIPAC would help him out to make sure that he stays in that race, to make sure that he stays in that seat. Let's go on a little bit more here. The poll was the latest sign that Schumer's standing among the Democratic base is taking a hit since he voted to advance a GOP funding bill last month that avoided a government shutdown. The fact that Data for Progress conducted and released the poll also underscores that liberal organizations are continuing to look for ways to prod Schumer to take a tougher stance against President Donald Trump. This poll really does show that Democrats are united in just wanting to stand up, wanting to fight wanting to see someone take a stand for them. That's coming from Danielle, who's the executive director of the Data for Progress. I will say this, some of my friends that did vote for Kamala Harris, they are really angry, not just angry at Trump. They are angry because they made it very clear to me that they feel like the Democratic Party isn't fighting. I mean, they're not wrong. Like, as a party, they're not wrong. And they feel like they can vent to me about this because I'm a registered independent. So, I mean, I voted third party. I voted for Jill Stein. So it's like they'll come to me and vent to me about it because they know if they voice those kind of frustrations with other people that are liberals, they're going to get a lot of backlash. Isn't that sad? So the people are saying that they're not happy with Chuck. It goes on to say here, she added that her firm has a long tradition of wanting to challenge the status quo of the Democratic Party leadership. She showed that there was a polling that was released in 2021 showing that Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema was vulnerable to a primary challenge. Sinema later registered as an independent and declined to run for re-election. But Kyrsten Sinema was terrible. But Kyrsten Sinema also was in bed with the hedge fund guys. So Kyrsten Sinema is not like, oh, I'm not going to have a job after if I don't win this seat. She was all good. All good. She went to the Bilderberg meeting. How do you get invited to Bilderberg and you just became a senator? Think about that. She was already in bed with the hedge fund managers and that kind of thing. So she's going to be fine. Still we'll never forget she's the one that gave the thumbs down for the $15 minimum wage. Ridiculous. It is unclear what AOC's poll could mean for the New York primaries in 3 years. However, with surveys this early rarely being predictive, AOC has also been non-committal about a potential Senate run. Schumer has filed paperwork to run for re-election. So if you are just joining, new poll shows head-to-head AOC with Chuck Schumer that she is beating him by double digits. But the question is she actually going to run against him? She may get some pushback from leadership about that. And for the people who are defending Chuck Schumer, I want to show you this clip here. Shout out to Case Study QB for this one. This in itself just goes to show you, even MSNBC is calling out Chuck. Listen to this.
The big problem for many Democrats, their leader and their leadership. This is what Senator Chuck Schumer said on our air just last night.
We're fighting them every day. And my message to Democrats is, as bad as Trump is, and as bad as the American people are seeing he is, we have to fight every single day to show them what he's doing and what we will stand for in complete opposite of what Trump wants.
Cool story, bro. He says that he's fighting back against Trump. And to be fair, he is, I suppose, in his own way. But he's like a thermostat that can't read the room or take the temperature of his own party.
I actually like that phrase. I love it. He said, cool, bro. I like that. Yeah. No, he can't take the temperature. But not only he can't take it, he doesn't want to take it. He doesn't want to take the temperature. When I say there's two sides to the story, it's not just that AOC is beating Chuck Schumer in that poll by double digits. It's also that Chuck Schumer is that old school establishment Democrat that has been in politics for quite some time. He went to Harvard. He's the typical cookie cutter politician that you usually see, like in the Democratic Party. He's not going to change. And I know he's not going to change because friend of the show, Roger Meadows, attended a meeting that Chuck Schumer was hosting in New York. And he actually got Chuck Schumer to admit that, yes, we can afford Medicare for all, but we're not going to be voting on it. He's not going to change. He is who he is. And he made it very clear why he's there in the Senate. And that is to make sure that the left remains pro-Israel. That's what Chuck Schumer wants. So you're not going to get any progress through Chuck, except maybe him kneeling in kente cloth again. I don't know. But the progress, that's not going to come from Chuckity Chuck. So there's two sides of the story, because one side could be that people feel that AOC is doing so much better than Chuck Schumer. But the other side could just be that Chuck Schumer is not willing to change. Chuck Schumer is not willing to grow. Chuck Schumer is not listening to the base. He's not listening to a lot of his constituents, and he really doesn't care, because he knows that big money interest is going to back him up. He knows that if he's polling bad, that AIPAC can dish out thousands of ads to help him win. These people do need to go. Chuck Schumer needs to go. Nancy Pelosi needs to step her old ass down. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm sorry. Your time is up. Your time is up. They're just holding space at this point. They're holding space. They kept Dianne Feinstein there. The woman was obviously not in the state, did not have the mental capacity to vote on legislation, and people had to tell her what to say and what to do. It was obvious she should not have been in Congress anymore, but they keep them there because that's what the donor class wants. That's what they want. Let's continue on here.
Lately, there's been a lot of discussion on whether this is the Democrats' Tea Party moment. The last time a base was this angry at its own leadership, 2009, when Republicans were furious about Obama, Wall Street bailouts, and the ACA. The issues are obviously very different at this time, but the anger, it feels similar. The movement channeled rage into power, and love them or hate them, they got what they wanted. The Tea Party walked so that MAGA and America First could run. Whether or not you think Democrats should take a page for them, one thing is absolutely clear. Party leaders have to try something, anything, to shift the narrative that they are not working hard enough to actually resist Trump.
It's not just about resisting Donald Trump, though. That's part of it. It's about resisting billionaires. It's about resisting corporate influence. It's about resisting Wall Street, resisting big pharma, resisting these donors. You know, years ago, people used to talk about Citizens United, like in Citizens United. And I feel like people don't talk about that much anymore. I felt like after Biden won, people just kind of, I don't know. I feel like people just kind of like went back to sleep, like right after he won. And I think that's how you end up in this situation. I want to go on here and I want to show you as well. Charlemagne the God had something to say about Chuck Schumer as well. And he's pointing out what Cory Booker said about Chuck. And Charlemagne had a good point here. I pick on Charlemagne sometimes because I'm like, some of the stuff he says about politics isn't true. But it is what it is. He's right here in this statement when he says that people need to tell Chuck Schumer no. Listen to this.
The Dems need somebody that just throws all this old shit under the bus. There's the part when Cory was filibustering, when Chuck Schumer, maybe I don't know if you can find it, we can add it later, when Chuck Schumer was trying to tell him that he broke the record. Chuck goes, I want to ask you a question. And Cory goes, this is the only time, Senator Schumer, that I can ever tell you no. And I didn't respect that because somebody needs to tell Chuck no.
Would the senator yield for a question?
Chuck Schumer, it's the only time in my life I can tell you no.
I just want to tell you a question. Do you know you have just broken the record? Do you know how proud this caucus is of you? Do you know how proud America is of you?
Well, don't speak too soon, Chuck, because we don't even know what this is. That's the problem. So when I saw that, like I see people saying today, like, yo, I think I saw Jamie Harrison say, you know, Cory became the new leader of the party. Like, no, he didn't. Until you're able to tell people like Chuck Schumer, no, you can never be a leader. The Dems.
I think that Charlemagne the God has a really good point there. This is a time when I agree with him about that. Yeah, Chuck Schumer is the leader of the party. People have to understand Chuck Schumer is very, very powerful. So if you can't say no to him, how are you going to say no to Netanyahu? If you can't say no to him, how are you going to say no to AIPAC? How are you going to say no to all these other people? By the way, Cory Booker didn't say no to AIPAC. We've talked about that before on the show. But that's a test. I said the same thing when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House. Remember we were talking about this? Like, you guys have got to like say no to Nancy Pelosi, and people weren't willing to say no to her either. And that's what I'm saying. People should be running over Hakeem Jeffries right now. Hakeem Jeffries does not look like a leader to me. Hakeem Jeffries to me looks like he is just, nah, I'm here. It is what it is. Listen, we are going to fight hard. And these policies that Trump is doing is insane at this point in time. Okay, you not convinced me you want to fight. I mean, if I had to pick two people to go into a ring to fight against Donald Trump, I would not pick Hakeem Jeffries. You see what I mean? It's just things like that. But this sounds another alarm because it shows you more people are starting to run. This is interesting, you guys. I want to show you this as well. Again, shout out to Case Study QB. People are so upset that the Democratic Party as a party is not fighting back hard enough against Donald Trump. More people have decided, screw this, I'm going to run my damn self. Case Study QB here, Run for Something says almost 500 people a day are signing up to run for office, totaling almost 40,000 people. A lot of them are Gen Z. Listen to this.
The chaos wrought by Donald Trump's tariffs and Elon Musk's slashing of the federal government may bring not just a political opening for Democrats generally, but young and progressive Democrats particularly. Voters fed up with what they see as insufficient responses from the old guard are eyeing alternatives. The Washington Post quotes one operative saying, the Democratic Party is dominated by an older generation of leaders who have lost touch with Americans' day-to-day struggles. Senator John Ossoff, at 38, decades younger than most of his fellow senators, has raised a record-busting $11 million in the last 3 months.
I'm sorry, it's kind of funny when she said decades younger. She didn't say years, she said decades.
Campaign tells Politico. The campaign notes it is the most ever raised by an incumbent in the first quarter of an off year. And one grassroots organization, Run for Something, that helps train young people to run for office, says almost 500 of them are signing up every day. Many already running this year for offices from school board to city council to state legislature. I want to bring in the executive director of Move On, Ronna Epting. Also with us, Amanda Littman, co-founder and president of Run for Something. Amanda, I've covered your organization, watched it grow from the beginning, but 500 people a day? What's going on?
You know, since the election back in November, Run for Something has had almost 40,000 young people all across the country raise their hands and say they want to run for state or local office for the first time. They're mostly people under the age of 40. Majority are women. They're from all 50 states. And they are saying, if the Democratic leadership in DC is not going to fight for me, if my city council is not going to fight for me, I am going to fight for me. And we're going to be here to help them every step of the way.
Have tariffs exacerbated all of that?
You know, I think it's just another moment of fury, a chance for people to really understand how what's happening in DC is affecting their lives. But this has been building. This is not the first, and it certainly won't be the last thing that Trump does that pushes people to say, I want to get in this fight myself.
A lot of people, you guys, again, shout out to Case Study QB for that clip. He's always doing the damn thing. A lot of people signing up to run for office. So we'll have to wait and see, obviously, what happens. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to come down to big money interest. Because I think, again, it's like you can have a great campaign, you can have a great policy agenda, great platform, and it's like big money can come in and just knock you out, right? Which is why I always say we need to get corporate money out of electoral politics. We got to get corporate money out of electoral politics, you guys. There are other countries in the world that have free public elections. And it just, that would change, that would be a game changer for us. It really would. And I think we need to push more of that. But she's beating him by double digits. Crazy stuff, folks. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you, Peter. How long after Boeing makes B-47 before it crashes? I know we've been hating on Boeing a lot, right? Boeing has seriously been like, wow, man. Thank you, Jasmine. She can't lead a Tea Party movement with how she's compromised on her values. On a positive note, my baby came early and we get to recover with Sabby. Daniel gives a sleepy hello, comrades. Let's give it up for Jasmine. We haven't dropped the beat in a while. We haven't done it, folks, but we cannot not drop a beat for Jasmine, who just had her baby. Let's drop that noise. Dance with me. Dance with me. Peace. Woo! Congratulations! Congratulations so much, Jasmine. Oh my gosh. Wow. I did not expect that one. Awesome. Jasmine calls into the call-in a lot. So awesome. Thank you, Sophia. Declaration of Independence, Pursuit of Happiness in View of the Ninth has more balls now than the Free Speech Amendment. Just to get to say something when you get there in the future, in my opinion, in my honest opinion, love back. Thank you, Raven. We need to take historical artifacts and materials and begin exiting into Canada with them right now. Everybody wants to go to Canada. Miss Kiwi, I can see Dems moving Cory Booker over to Senate Democratic leadership. I wouldn't like it, but I can see it happening because we're not voting for him as president. Ooh, that's an interesting point. Professor Zinkas Ossoff is a pro-war, anti-worker, pro-genocide hack. But hey, he's young. Thank you, James, for the $20. James says, thank you. You are welcome. James' last name is Bondage. Oh. Thank you, Justin. I'm silly tonight. I'm sorry. Justin says young people have to stop running as Dems. They need to start running as Greens so we can finish the Dems for good and build a party for the people. There you go. Thank you, Raven, or run as independents. Thank you, Raven. As an FBA, I believe whites in this country won't get it until they smell the ovens. And thank you, B-Man. The Democrats are fine with Citizens United. Let's go to Rockfin. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey. Thank you, Roger. Chuck is not up for re-election until 2028. Kristen, 2030. Kristen, Gillibrand. When that time comes around, this will all be forgotten about. There'll be some other worldwide event that everyone's focusing on. If she ran, she would have to give up her House seat. Bowman might want to think about that, or State Assemblyman Zoran Mamdani, since he'll probably lose to Cuomo in that New York City mayor race, but run as an indie. Thank you for that. And thank you for this one. Constitution says each state shall send 2 senators to DC to represent their state. Tell me what you think of this. Have each state run an amendment via as a CBI or legislative that breaks the state into 2 U.S. Senate districts. For instance, New York State has 62 counties. We can have one represent 31 contiguous counties and the other representing the more rural counties upstate. So all attention doesn't get focused on New York City. That's an interesting point, Roger. Interesting point. I wonder how people who live in upstate New York feel about not just politics, but just in general, that it seems like all of the attention goes to New York City. You know, New York's a big state. There's more out there in New York besides New York City. There's Albany, there's Rochester, there's Syracuse. And some of you are hearing this and you're probably like, yeah, it's just New York City. But I wonder how they feel. All right, guys, smash the like button if you haven't done so. Thank you. And we're going to move on to the next story here, folks. Man, I really don't like it when people say, I told you so. But I've said it to people as well. But this time, that comment isn't going over as well as I think Kamala would have liked it to. So Kamala Harris gave a speech recently, and the message that she is sending out into the egosphere is that she told you so. And what has been the response? Let's go ahead and get into this video here. Again, the theme is 2 sides of the story. Check this out.
When one person, when a few stand with the courage, that is the courage exhibited by the leaders in this room every day, to stand, to have the courage to say, I feel fear. The courage to say what is happening is wrong. the courage to say that there is a way that we must chart to get through this. Understanding our power in the democracy we still have if we hold on to it. Courage is contagious.
What could have been, everyone? What could have been? That, of course, was former Vice President Kamala Harris speaking at a summit of women leaders earlier this evening. It's one of the first times we've seen her speak out since her November election loss. She hasn't been out there a ton. We'll see if she comes out more. She also spoke about the current state of fear in our country.
We are seeing organizations stay quiet. We are seeing those who are capitulating to clearly unconstitutional threats. And these are the things that we are witnessing each day in these last few months in our country. And it understandably creates a great sense of fear. Because, you know, there were many things that we knew would happen. Many things. I'm not here, so I told you so.
Yeah, the I told you so part. Here's the thing. When people are down and out, when people are struggling, as people are right now, still economically, people don't want to hear I told you so. That's the thing. Like, it's the message that you send across to people. And I think her saying that is kind of to say, well, people should have voted for me and you wouldn't be in this mess, right? But the majority of people stayed home. And instead of saying, I told you so, I think what Kamala Harris should be doing, which is something that you're going to see from Tim Walz in a second, what he's apparently doing, is you should ask, why did people stay home? And I point to the people who stayed home and not those of us that voted third party, because the numbers for third party votes don't help Kamala Harris. And we went over that before. The totals that Jill Stein got, RFK Jr., Claudia de la Cruz, Cornel West, when you total all the votes from the third party and independent candidates, if you give those votes to Kamala Harris, she still loses. So if I were in that position, I would ask myself, what was it about me? What was it about my platform? What was it about my message? What was it about this party that made so many people stay home? That is the question that I would ask. Let's go on a little bit more here.
First of all, she predicted a lot of these things that were going to happen, and many people are definitely scared. We see that out there. But we're also seeing that people are going out in full force to resist, with mass mobilization across the country, including a huge nationwide rally called Hands Off, planned on Saturday. And joining me now is one of the people headlining the rally in D.C., Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is, of course, a Democrat of Maryland, also ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. Congressman, it's great to see you. First, it's been a pretty good week for Democrats, I think. A week where people saw lots of candidates announce they were going to run. You saw Senator Booker do an overnight inspiring moment on the floor. Lots of good things happening in Wisconsin. And you're going to be the headline speaker for the Hands Off rally, as I mentioned, in D.C., with an expected attendance of 12,500 people. We'll see. Where do you see this mobilization effort against the Trump administration policies at this moment?
Well, you know, I was telling everybody back when people were complaining about where's the Democratic leadership, where's the energy, where's the focus, that it takes a while to fully absorb the shock of these events. I mean, we're talking about a full-blown attempt at an authoritarian takeover of our country and a purge of federal workers, and we're being hit on all fronts. But now everybody is in a fighting mood. I am down here in Orlando, Florida with my buddy Maxwell Frost. He just kicked off his year-long organizing program, and he's the co-chair of Democracy Summer. We're going to be announcing Democracy Summer. We're hoping to have more than 1,000 young people across the country working full-time on Democratic campaigns and studying with great Democratic heroes of the past. The energy is extraordinary. It's astounding. What is this, a Thursday night? There were, 350 people just packed in the firefighters hall, and lots of people couldn't get in. Everywhere, all over America, people understand the stakes now. The entire country, as we know it, is on the line with these people, and they are in a full-blown effort to turn the government into a gangster state. And Donald Trump is doing everything in his power to disable the crime and corruption fighting capacity of the FBI and the Department of Justice, so he can just use it to go after his political adversaries. But meantime, the real corruption is just running amok, and these people are not opponents of corruption, waste, fraud, and abuse, as they keep saying. They are agents of corruption and instruments of waste and fraud throughout the government.
Yeah. But you're an agent of corruption too, Jamie. Like that's a big part of the problem, is that the Democratic Party is you're supposed to offer something that is going to be the counter to the Republican Party. But over the years, the Democratic Party has become closer and closer to the Republican Party, especially when it comes to Israel. I mean, it's both parties take billionaire money. Both parties answer to their donors first. I mean, let's be real. The only reason that American Rescue Package happened was because of the pandemic. But Americans needed to be rescued years ago. Americans needed to be rescued in 2008 during the housing crisis. I know. Americans needed to be rescued a couple years after that. Like this has been a problem. For those of us that are millennials or Gen Z, and I'm an older millennial, I don't think you guys understand, but ever since I've been a freaking adult, the economy has been a disaster. The first job I was able to get out of undergrad, they wanted to pay me $8 an hour. That's how bad things have been. So when we talk about this, I want you to hear that perspective. And then I want you to hear what Tim Walz, his response is to what Kamala Harris said with "I told you so." There are two sides of the story. And I think you're going to see something a little bit different here from the way that he chooses to respond.
We're seeing, I have to say though, what does "I told you so" really mean here? I mean, people heard her message. They did not vote for her. She lost every battleground state. You yourself have criticized the Harris-Walz campaign for being too cautious. She may have told the American people, she may have warned the American people, but she didn't do it compellingly enough to win.
That is the absolute point. And look, when I criticize, I'm criticizing myself. I own this. I'm part of the ticket. And somebody has to come up with a strategy. I think this is exactly right. This is the thing. Look, Democrats, it was a good night in Wisconsin. I was over there. We saw that happen. Donald Trump's doing this. Just to be clear, nobody on the Democratic side is celebrating this. And those folks in the street are not celebrating that Donald Trump's making all these errors. I think what the vice president's saying is that was pretty self-evident that he was going to do that. I do think the challenge for Democrats, and this is, I think, a structural problem that's going to take a lot more thinking. Why, with all of that out there, did they not think we were any better than that? And they didn't. And I'm very concerned with the folks who stayed home. And these are folks that I'll say once again, Donald Trump has identified their angst. They can't buy a house. They can't afford to get a good education. They're concerned that their economic future is so precarious it could slip out from under them. Less than half of Americans have $1,000 in savings. And I think, why was it not so compelling? It should have been a slam dunk for us to say, we're the party that cares about that. We're the party that's going to protect Social Security and Medicare. We're the party that thinks the ACA is a good start, but we need to do more on health care. And we didn't do that. So I'm concerned. Democrats do well in special elections and off-year elections, but the electorate that comes in presidential election years is different. When I was young, it was easy to know what a Democrat was. They stood with the working class and labor. Republicans were country club and for the rich. Today, you ask people, they don't. We have a 29% approval rating.
Yeah.
Pause. Now, I need to remind you, don't forget that Jake Tapper is writing a book. I think that book should be released sometime shortly about how Biden sabotaged things for Kamala Harris. So just keep that in mind. But I want to point out something that Tim Walz said there. Notice that he said, look, I own this. Like, we need to take responsibility for our actions. Why can't Kamala say that? Instead of I told you so, why can't Kamala Harris say, look, I own this? Because people respect that more. I'm going to be honest with you. People respect that more. It's like someone, these athletes, right? I always bring up sports analogies, right? But think about it this way, right? Back in the day, Michael Jordan dominated basketball. And if you were a big Jordan fan like me, Jordan, when they lost, which was rare, but when the Bulls lost and they're interviewed after the game, you never saw Michael Jordan blame the other team. You never saw Michael Jordan blame other people for the reason why they lost. In fact, you don't see that from a lot of the athletes with these interviews after the game. They usually sit there and they tell you, yeah, I just couldn't get it together tonight. Just got to go back and grind harder. Got to go back and train harder. Got to work harder. I just didn't get there tonight. They own it. They take responsibility. That's taught. And if any of you have played sports, you know that, right? I played sports. If you played sports, you understand your coach teaches you how to accept responsibility and not put the blame on other people. And that should have been the thing to do. That's what Kamala should be saying. I own this. We didn't get there. I own it. Not, I don't want to say I told you so. You have to excite the people to come out. The people you got to give them a reason to get off the couch and come vote for you. And if people don't feel like you giving them a reason, they're going to stay home. And most Americans do. Most Americans stay home.
It doesn't help us any that Donald Trump ends up with a 25% approval rating. We have to get back to the core issues, that this is about making America prosperous and stable and innovative for everybody.
Well, what do you make of the criticism that one of the reasons why your party was so resoundingly rejected last November is because Democrats were gaslighting the country, saying that inflation was not a big deal, heralding Bidenomics. Not only Biden, but Kamala Harris was heralding Bidenomics, pretending that there wasn't a problem at the border. And then fundamentally, this idea that President Biden was up for another 4 years of the job, while Americans in poll after poll for year after year were saying he's too old to do the job. Your party stood against all of those things.
Now, Jake didn't say any of this last year when it mattered. But Jake has written a book. So now this is his way of let me say some of the things from my book out there. But last year, of course, did not say those things when it mattered. But to that point, look, everybody with eyes knew that Biden was not fit to have another presidential term. We all saw this. The fact that Biden stayed in as long as he did is absolutely ridiculous. But I think that's partly due to his ego and stubbornness. Do I think that means that Kamala would have won if he would have gotten out of that race earlier? No, I still don't think she would have won. But I think it definitely made things more difficult in that sense. He mentioned the working class in the Democratic Party, and I think it is especially important to mention that the Democratic Party is not the party of the working class, and neither is the Republican Party. Things changed a long time ago. Democratic Party wasn't the party of the working class under Obama either. So it's been a while. This isn't a new thing. Big money interest change the party. And you have all this money going to corporations, all this money, going to the billionaire class. And meanwhile, Americans became more poor. That's why there's no middle class. I don't care what anybody says. People are like, oh, there's middle class. No, not really. Not really. So you can see that. He goes on a little bit more here. I want to let him answer this.
Look, Joe Biden coming in and during COVID and being a governor through COVID did a hell of a job. But I think one of the things that we didn't do is we assumed that we said, and it was true, that we were going to have a soft landing and our economy was better than the rest of the world. Better for who? Better for the working class who was saying groceries were too expensive, as they are now and going up. They got to see us talk about things. Again, I go back to this. Don't talk about food insecurity or housing type of issues. Talk about people being hungry and wondering where they're going to live, or about their children's future, about real security. And so I think your question is spot on. I think we got intellectualized on this. I think the fact of the matter is Joe Biden did soft land the economy. He did usher us through COVID. None of us are saying we should be soft on the border, but we allow a vacuum, and Donald Trump fills it, the 800-pound gorilla, and their narrative starts to stick, and we look weak. We look weak like we don't care. We look like look, Jake, I'm not going to say, we need to do is we need to just arrest people and ship them to El Salvador. No, we need to invest the money on border. We need to make sure that we have the judges necessary to adjudicate things faster. We need to make sure if you're going to be in this country, you're legal, and when you are, you're going to be uplifted, celebrated, and part of this great American tapestry. We didn't do that, and then it fills them. They'll find the example that is horrific, where you have someone who's not here legally and they commit a crime. That is horrific, but we don't do a good job of telling that.
Don't you think your party needs...
I need to pause here for a second and explain something. It's not enough just to say that they need to tell a different story or they need to say something that's different. The problem is there's no action. I can tell you that I support Medicare for all, but if the bill comes through the House and I don't vote for it, I can tell you that we need to increase the minimum wage, but if the bill comes through and I don't vote for it, so there's no action. What Donald Trump has shown you since he got into the White House is just how much the president can do via executive order. Doesn't mean I agree with the things that he did via executive order, but he showed you it can be done. And all those times when we had Democrat presidents, when we had Joe Biden and also Obama, they signed executive orders too. But you sat here and you listened to Joe Biden say if Medicare for all bill came across his desk, he wouldn't sign, he would veto it. So they were never looking out for our best interests. And that's because they're all bought off. I think that Kamala needs to own that, man. I think that the people who are shaming voters, I think you need to let Kamala own this shit, because nothing is owed to you just because you feel it's your time. In 2016, that was supposed to be Hillary's time. Hillary wasn't willing to own it either. This woman went on for years talking about how that Bernie Sanders is the reason why I didn't win. No, it was you. It was you. She never owned it. She wasn't willing to own it. It's always everything else. It's the person is racist. The person is sexist. The person is this and da-da-da. And yes, that does exist. Some people don't want to vote for a woman. Some people don't want to vote for someone that is a different race. Yeah, that does exist, but that's not everybody. The question is, how did all the people who don't feel that way stay at home and not come out and support you? There's a whole base of people that are not being, the Democratic Party is just totally looking over. They stopped trying to mobilize the working poor. Damn enough the working class. They ain't trying to go to trailer parks. They're not trying to go to the hood no more. They've been stopped that. And then they look over the working class, and now they're just fixated on these academic elites. The coastal cities that you're going to win any damn way. The reason why Trump was able to win in 2016 is because he went to rural communities in Pennsylvania that Hillary Clinton didn't think to go to, even though her husband told her, don't ignore the Rust Belt. He tapped into people that the Democrats looked over. There's a whole population of people out there that are just forgotten. Just forgotten about. And I think we need to start asking, what's going to happen to those people? Because I just want to say 10, 15 years from now, which isn't that far. I know some of you don't want to think that far down the road, but 10 to 15 years from now, which isn't that far away, what's going to happen to those people? I told you so. Jesus Christ. We can go to part 2, Corey, of Type VNC. Let's go to the comments here. Clever says, facts, sis, preach. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's go to these up here as well. Shout out to Charlie Mack. Charlie's a part of the Boston Mutual Aid chapter. He's saying congrats to Jasmine. Thank you, baby Ethernet. Kamala, your word salad has expired. Damn. Denise. Sabby, I came here late. Do you know Macron went to Egypt to talk about Gaza? No, I didn't know that. He is totally against moving the Palestinians out of there. May this change things? I didn't know that. I'll have to look into that. Sunlight says RFK is getting ripped a new one on X about the measles. I saw. Oh my God. Hey, man. People came after me. I tried to warn people about RFK. Thank you, buddy. Even with things like they are, I still wouldn't vote for her. Interesting. The Oracle said, but Sabby, Kamala already knows what she wasn't willing to offer and why she lost. Thank you, Sunlight. Booker is not inspiring. Fake ass Carlton Banks. I wish I could play the song on here. Dun, 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 dun. It's not unusual to be loved by anyone. This is so bad. Thank you, Jasmine. Kamala is the embodiment of liberal feminism. I want all the power, but no accountability when I mess up. Is always someone else's fault. And thank you, Rick. Stop funding a genocide for starters, then we'll talk. There you go. Oh my God. Aye. Oh man. Okay. We have, this story. All right. We got 2 more stories and then we will go to Colin. All right. Again, the theme, ladies and gentlemen, is there's 2 sides of the story. Now, I want to start with this one. Obviously, you guys know we've been talking about the tariffs for quite some time. And China is one of those countries that has decided to respond to us in an epic way by slapping a 34% tariff as a retaliation against the United States government. You really can't get mad at them. I mean, what do you expect them to do? What do you expect them to do? So there's that response. But then there's something else that China did that I think a lot of people don't know about. And Eric sent me this story. This has kind of gone under the radar. Let's start with that retaliation first. Let's go ahead and get into that here.
Is China coming to the table or not?
Well, which table are you talking about? If they were coming into the ring to fight and take off the gloves and fight back, yes, they're going to be doing that. China has been fairly measured so far, and Xi Jinping essentially telling his government to remain calm until now. I think they had probably taken a little bit too many punches themselves, and finally 34% that takes effect on all U.S. goods imported into China on April 10th. So mid this week, there are a number of different export controls. They've added some defense companies to their so-called blacklist, the entity list. They are banning chicken imports from some American companies, sorghum from one American companies. Also, again, those rare earths, further restrictions on the outflow of rare earths, which China controls a large swath of them for the tech supply chain. You know, Danny was just talking about Apple. That is a good example of how these Trump tariffs do affect American companies who, after the first trade war with China, diversified to the so-called China Plus One strategy, going, Apple in particular, making iPhones and Macs and other products in India, in Thailand, in Indonesia, Vietnam, and of course Taiwan, a huge part of the tech supply chain, all of them getting sizable tariffs from the Trump administration. So It's going to be a balancing act, obviously, for China as it tries to rebalance its economy, to boost domestic consumption, to take up its excess industrial overcapacity. You have to watch what the markets are going to do today, because the markets here in Hong Kong and in China onshore were on holiday on Friday. They didn't take the brunt like the U.S. markets did on Friday. And also you have to watch the yuan. The onshore yuan, the currency, essentially weakening to its lowest level since February. And that is one concern that they could potentially, and they haven't so far, they've kept the yuan stable, they could potentially weaponize the yuan and weaken the yuan further.
Is China...
Okay, so China, guys, again, responding to the United States tariffs, 34%. And we do receive a lot of goods from China. This is what I was warning people about earlier on. That will impact us. Now, Donald Trump has responded and has decided to increase the tariffs towards China by 50%. I'm not kidding. When we talk about trade war, this is definitely a trade war. Check this out.
More now on the president's threat against China to impose an extra 50% tariff on goods imported into the U.S. if Beijing doesn't withdraw its 34% counter tariff. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer is in Beijing for us and has the latest on how China is reacting. Janice?
China responded to President Trump's threat of additional tariffs with defiance and its own threat of countermeasures to fight a trade war with the U.S. to the end. If President Trump goes through with what he has vowed, this additional 50% tariffs on all Chinese goods going into the U.S., that's 104% on anything consumers buy from China. Clothing.
104% on any goods that we buy that are from China. And Brenda, I believe, already said it in the chat. And that's the first thing I thought about, too. Temu won't be cheap anymore. No. I know a lot of us like Temu because Temu is very cheap. But no, it won't be. I'm also thinking about electronics. I'm thinking about people that work in certain industries where they do have to purchase electronics, whether it's certain computers, whether it's iPhones, iPads, like those types of things. You know, where are they made? And I think this could be really dangerous. Now, obviously, none of us want to have to pay that. None of us want to have to do that. And I think what Trump may be trying to do is to say, okay, I'm just going to fight back against you with this, kapow, you know. But this isn't Street Fighter, and this isn't Mortal Kombat. And the rest of us live in the real world, and we can't afford those things. And I'm saying right now, and I'm telling you guys, all of you that got an iPhone, what happens if you break your screen? And not to pick on you. It's just that my friends that have iPhones, they tell me they're the ones that crack their screens. I've never had a screen crack for my Samsung. Never. I've never had an Android screen crack. So I want you to think about these things. Like that, this is insane. And it's not a joke. And I feel like Donald Trump, he's just playing a joke, like with our lives. Oh, the American people, you guys can take this hit for a little bit while we just have this little trade war. No, someone like him can take that hit. As Max Blumenthal also mentioned, this is impacting billionaires too, right? Trump don't really care. But billionaires like Bill Ackman is speaking out against it. He's like, wait a minute. Now this is starting to impact me. Let's go on a little bit more.
Shoes, car parts, toys, tech, household goods, the list goes on. China is very clear in saying it will not back down from imposing countermeasures to what officials here call U.S. blackmail. They see negotiation as legitimizing President Trump's trade blitz that is hitting manufacturing hubs right across Asia. Japan, Vietnam, Cambodia, South Korea, they're all signaling they want to negotiate with the U.S., though talks, it seems, are no guarantee of getting tariff relief. Here, a spokesperson for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed there are no talks at any level between the U.S. and China over trade, saying, quote, the U.S. lacks a genuine willingness to engage in serious dialogue. Now, before the markets opened here today, the government unleashed a series of measures to help stabilize the stock market, including share buybacks by several state-owned companies. They're known here as China's national team, and that helped the markets close higher. The deadlines, though, are piling on now. All these back-to-back tariffs are set to take effect over the next 48 hours and threaten to disrupt trade, supply chains, and ultimately raise prices for U.S. consumers down the road. Janice Mackey-Freer, NBC News, Beijing.
So think about that there just for a second, right? So again, depending on what type of industry that you work in, that could be a problem. And I want to bring up manufacturing here for just a second. I know one of the things that people want is for manufacturing to grow again in the United States. People are like, bring manufacturing back. First of all, it should have never left in the first damn place. Had it not been for things like NAFTA, we probably wouldn't be in this situation. Let's just keep it real. But what I do want you to understand, when I said that oftentimes, even American businesses or mom and pop businesses, the products that they make may be made here in the US, but the materials come from other countries like China or like Mexico. I'm not joking. And that leads me again to manufacturing. When you talk about bringing manufacturing back to the United States and making it thrive and grow again, you can't just build a factory overnight. And with those factories, you need machines to make those products that you use and that you buy. But those machines aren't made here. Those machines are made in countries like China. So just think about anybody that's working in manufacturing right now. Yes, this could impact you. That means you will have to pay this almost double now? Almost double for these machines for your business. So everyone will be impacted. That's what I meant when I said we don't really make stuff here. We really don't. We don't even make the damn machines to make the stuff. So that's a problem. That's a big problem. So part of the thing when people say bring manufacturing back to the United States, I would say part of that includes you have to start making those machines that are used in the factories. You have to start making those here first. And we're not doing that. Let's go on a little bit more. I'm going to show you something else that China did that's a doozy.
Joining us now is Ned Price, a former senior State Department and CIA official. Ned, when China says it will fight to the end, what could that look like?
Well, Anna, it will look like nothing good for American businesses and consumers. We've already heard from your correspondent that with these tariffs set to go into effect, it could double prices of imported goods from China. Look, Anna, there is no question that the playing field for American consumers and businesses needs to be leveled with China. But there is a smart way to do that, and then there is Trump's way of doing that. And I think it's important to distinguish those two precisely because of what we've heard from Beijing and frankly from Washington over the past week or so. Trump's approach has done nothing but embolden leaders in Beijing. He has really imposed these massive tariffs and a mistaken belief that tariffs are not a means to an end, in other words, leveling the playing field, but really an end unto themselves. And he's given Chinese leaders really no face-saving off-ramp. We often forget that leaders like Chinese President Xi Jinping, while may not be elected in the democratic sense, may not be worried about his next re-election, is worried about his legitimacy and legacy. And Donald Trump has really put him in a corner. And just as you said, as your correspondent said, they're girding for a fight. And ultimately, a fight between the U.S. and China on these points will only result in higher prices for American consumers, precisely the effect that Donald Trump says he was elected to counteract.
Higher prices. Again, if there's one country to go to war with over trade, I would not choose China, since, again, a lot of things that we consume in the United States do come from China. I mean, I'm gonna keep it real. We ain't got it like that. When you compare us to China, we don't have the technology that they have. We just don't. We ain't got it like that. And that's not someone you want to pick a battle with. And instead of fighting against China, why aren't we trying to work with them? Why does everything have to be, let's fight against this country instead of working with them and building and growing together? because the US government, they want to dominate the entire world. It's like the US government wants to be the dominant power. And what I'm saying is that the days of that are going away. And you can see that with an organization like BRICS. You're seeing these countries are saying, we don't want a dominant power anymore. We want a multipolar world. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you look at the Black Panthers in particular, they had a horizontal model. They talked about that. Horizontal. Why can't we be a part of that? Why can't we be a part of what BRICS is doing? Let's all just work together for a better world and a better society, right? But something else that China did that I think has flown under the radar, and this is interesting. Check this out. China just turned off U.S. supplies of minerals critical for defense and clean tech. Oh, snap. And this just happened. So again, a lot of people aren't paying attention to this just because there's been so much talk about the tariffs in particular, but not so much about this. Check this out. China calmly walked over to the supply chain and yanked out a handful of critical bolts. The bolts are made of dysprosium, terbium, tungsten, indium, and yttrium. The elements that don't make headlines, but without which your electric car doesn't run. Your fighter jet doesn't fly. Your solar panels go from clean energy marvels to overpriced roofing tiles. They're minerals that show up on obscure government risk registers right before wars start or clean tech projects get quietly canceled. So here we go again, another thing that minerals that we depend on China for. What China did wasn't a ban, at least not in name. They called it export licensing. Sounds like something a trade lawyer might actually be excited about. But make no mistake, this was a surgical strike. They didn't need to say no. They just needed to say maybe later or the right set of paperwork. These licenses give Beijing control over not just where these materials go, but how fast they go, in what quantity, and to which politically convenient customers. So this is interesting, folks. It says here also about the materials. Let's get to this part. The materials China just restricted are not random. They're chosen with precision of someone who's read the U.S. product spec sheets and defense procurement orders. Start with dysprosium. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I'm sorry, guys. If your electric motor needs to function at high temperatures, and they all do, then mostly it is using neodymium magnets doped with dysprosium. No. Dysprosium? I'm sorry, guys. Damn. No, dysprosium, no thermal stability. No thermal stability, no functioning motor in your F-35 or your Mustang Mach-E. China controls essentially the entire supply of dysprosium. And no, there is no magical mine in Wyoming or Quebec waiting in the wings. So if it does not come out of China, it doesn't come out at all. Then there's tungsten, the metal that makes bullets bulletproof. Literally, tungsten is what you use when you need to cut, drill, punch, or penetrate anything harder than a stale marshmallow. The U.S. hasn't produced meaningful amounts of it since the Obama administration. And China sits on 80% of global production. Oh, sure, you can try Vietnam or Portugal, but good luck getting those volumes at scale without waiting years and paying triple. Tungsten isn't just ammunition. It is the tiny vertical connections between layers of circuitry and semiconductor chip, CNC machine tools, and high performance alloys that go into everything from jet engines to deep drilling rigs. When China put tungsten behind a licensing wall, it wasn't targeting one sector. It was targeting the industrial base of a specific big country that's trying to grow precision manufacturing at scale. And they go on to tell you more about these other materials as well. But do you get what they're trying to explain, guys? Is that these are materials that we know we can't just get it from somewhere else. We get it from them. And with all the discussion that has been happening about the tariffs, I found it interesting that when Eric sent me this article, I haven't heard people talk about this. I haven't heard people on the news talk about the materials that China just basically said, yeah, we're not sending it to you anymore. We're cutting you off from this. So people have to pay attention. Like I said, we just don't produce much here. So there's a lot to say about that, especially when we're talking about clean technology. That's another one, right? It says clean technology is next. It's going to hit U.S. dreams of actually manufacturing EVs, solar panels, and wind turbines for its domestic market hard. Without dysprosium and terbium, your EV motor gets downgraded to a clunky, less efficient design that eats more power and delivers less range. So for those of you who drive electric vehicles, that might be something you should know. Or if you want an electric vehicle, this might be important for you to know. So there's two sides of this story. One side is about the tariff war that is happening between China and the United States. But this other side of the story that has been kind of left out in the mainstream news are these materials that China just basically cut the US off from. And you really can't be mad at China about this. Because again, like, it's like poking the bear. Like, instead of trying to work with these countries, the US government is trying to work against them. They're trying to fight them. And you can't really, it's like trying to fight the hand that feeds you. I don't know. Like right now, Donald Trump is pretending as though we don't need things from China. And we do. We don't have it like that. I'm sorry, but we just don't. We don't have it like that. And I don't know, guys. I don't know. I don't know how this trade war is going to end, but I damn sure know that Americans should not have to bear the burden. Let's go to the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. We got one more story for you, and when we get to call in. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Kamala sounded like that brother that Damon Wayans played in Living Color, talking like a dictionary, who just knew he was saying something. Oh, man. Dritz. Heads up, Sabby. Back. I think you mean back up. Back up your pics and your phone. Samsung has been bricking phones with their shitty updates. Just happened to me on mine. Oh boy. Okay. Thanks for the heads up. Lance, he got elected on lowering prices. Now he's pushing his own supporters into the poorhouse. Kiwi says manufacturing in the US is over. That ship sailed. Thank you, Mark. Sound the word out one syllable at a time. I know. I'm sorry. And thank you, Roger. Blue warned of this months ago. The U.S. will FAFO. Let's get that comment on Rumble. Thank you. I love that you guys can put up with me. Hey, I'm about as real as you could get. We get the Rumble comment, and then we'll go to the next story. Okay. Thank you, Goo. Macron visit also entailed that he favors Western puppet Palestinian Authority to be in charge of Gaza and letting a guy named Dalan, who is a U.S.-Israeli UAE puppet, to run Gaza. I have to look into this story. That's two of you that have told me about this now. Dalan was a security personnel under PA until he was accused of corruption and ran and hid in the UAE. The protest against Hamas in Gaza lately was created by him through UAE and Israel. Well. Interesting. All right, guys, we've reached our final story. It's the final countdown. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Final story, and then I will be addressing some operatives, and then we'll go into call-in. This story about these the teenagers in Texas. A number of people were asking me to cover this story. I didn't cover it the moment that it broke because I knew there was going to be more to this story. When these types of incidents happen, I always like to wait at least 24, 48, at least 48 hours. So to see if there's more information that comes out. Because I think what you're going to see tonight is that the story that was presented to you about Carmelo is one side of the story. On this show, you're going to see that other side. There are two sides of this story. And what I noticed is that the victim's family, they made sure to get their narrative out first. Now, that is important because they were on offense, and that basically would put Carmelo on the defense. Typically, that's how it works. Whoever gets the story out to the media first, the people are more likely to be on your side. And then you wait to hear if more information does come out, and it has, and that's what we're going to get into tonight. Let's start with what was reported. Texas teenagers.
Now to Texas, where a father says he forgives the teen accused of fatally stabbing his son at a high school track meet. Police are now revealing what led to the terrifying moment. Here's ABC's Andrea Fujii.
New details about the killing of Austin Metcalf, the student stabbed at a high school track meet near Dallas. According to the arrest affidavit, 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony has confessed to the killing, saying he was trying to protect himself.
He knew how much I loved him, how much I do for him, anything. I do anything for him.
Hunter Metcalf says he held his twin brother Austin as he was dying.
I tried to whip around as fast as I could, but I didn't see the stab. But then I looked at my brother, and then I'm not going to talk about the rest. So.
It happened at the district championship meet in Frisco. Hunter says his brother had asked Carmelo to move his seat because he was sitting under the wrong tent. A witness says Carmelo replied, "Touch me and see what happens." And when Austin grabbed him, Carmelo allegedly pulled a knife.
They asked him to move, and when Austin grabbed his backpack to take it, he stabbed him in the chest and killed him.
He's now charged with first-degree murder.
Just because the kid was mad, my son is not here anymore, and I don't understand it.
Austin is...
Okay, so hold on to the statement there that they asked him to move, okay? Because I have another side of that story.
Being remembered as an honor student with aspirations to play college football. Despite the shocking loss, Austin's father says he chooses forgiveness over anger.
I forgive the other person because the forgiveness is not for him. The forgiveness is for me, so I can have peace. His life is destroyed. My life is destroyed.
The arrest affidavit says as Carmelo Anthony was being arrested, he asked if Austin was okay. Anthony is being held on $1 million bond.
Okay. So what I gathered there is that it sounds like Carmelo did not intend to kill him. Did not intend to kill him. If you're asking if they're okay. That's the narrative of the story that I think most people heard when the story was released, right? Now you're going to hear the other side of the story. And at the end of all of this, I ask that whatever bias that you may have, you put that aside and you pay attention to what the law says. That's how we're going to wrap this up. What does the law in Texas say? Here's another part to the story that the media did not dive into. And I'm going to show you the receipts for this as well. Listen to this.
Everybody's talking about this story regarding Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf down there in Frisco, Texas. Austin got unalived. A lot of people are trying to make it a race issue, and it's not. It has nothing to do with that right there. But a lot of people are attacking this young man and are showing the negative side and everything. But I want you to see him in his positive side because this was self-defense. The story that's being told Carmelo, he was sitting up under a tent, under the wrong tent and everything. That's what they said, under the wrong tent. And Austin came over there, told him to move. Said Carmelo got aggressive with him and everything, and then stabbed him with a knife in the heart and everything, and he passed away. That's not the full story. First off, Carmelo had permission from another coach to go over there and set up under that tent. He had permission. Another thing that was said and been spread out far and wide is that they didn't know each other. That's a lie. Because
Pause. So let me just explain something about the tent. There was a tent that belonged to another team, and apparently Carmelo had permission from the coach to go to that other tent. This is a track meet, by the way. I ran track. I know plenty of you probably ran track, and that's not uncommon. So we have to explain that. We have to explain to people, why was he under a tent of another team? And from what I read was that he did get permission to go over there. So let's go on.
they definitely knew each other. This is an older picture. They definitely knew each other. Other stuff that's coming out is Austin was being mean and harassing Carmelo, his girlfriend, actually, Carmelo's girlfriend. He was harassing her at a party that was about maybe a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago. Carmelo took up for his girlfriend. Then all of a sudden, the fight broke out. Austin broke Carmelo's phone just the day before this incident took place. So the day of this incident, Austin confronted Carmelo for sitting up under the tent in the wrong area. They got into an argument. Carmelo's backpack was grabbed, and then he was called the N-word. And then Austin tried to grab him forcibly. He tried to forcibly move him. And it wasn't Austin by himself.
Pause. So for those who may be confused, the white guy is Austin. The black guy is Carmelo. So I'm going to show you receipts that back up what he's saying here about what actually happened at that tent.
Both of them got up there and attacked Carmelo. Both of them did. And there were a lot of witnesses down there that said that the twins, plural, tried to jump him. Well, actually, they did jump him. They stomped on him and they broke his phone and they tried to take his things. So nothing peaceful was about that whole thing. And something else is going to come out. This is allegedly. Something else is going to come out. He had narcotics in his system. He did. Austin, he had narcotics in his system. That's what caused him to be overly aggressive. So just like I said over on the book face over there, that was self-defense. That's what he did. He did self-defense. Everybody's coming for him. People trying to make this out of something that is not self-defense.
Okay, so let's get into a little bit more, right? So I want to show you this post here. Let me pull this up on the screen here. There's more information that has been released. So they're going into how they're investigating the recent stabbing of Austin Metcalf that happened at a track rally. It has come to our attention, again, this is coming from Chief Shilson from the Frisco Police Department. This was April 3rd, 2025. It has come to our attention that a number of far-right bloggers have been spreading misinformation on social media about the incident or intentionally omitting the details and circumstances that resulted in the stabbing. We are also disturbed by the number of news articles that have been posting highly misleading and vague headlines, falsely insinuating that the victim was stabbed and killed at random. So let's just pause there. This is coming from the chief. This is why it's important to see both sides. Let's continue. It goes on to say, so just for clarification, we would like to reiterate yet again that this was not a random or unprovoked attack. Our department has made that clear numerous times in news interviews and press conferences. It was also not racially motivated. This is another thing that has been said over and over again online. Let's continue. Goes on to say here, the victim was stabbed during a mutual combat altercation that the white teen initiated with the suspect. Austin started a confrontation with the suspect because by demanding a seat at the David Kuykendall Stadium that the black teen had first. When he refused to give them the seat, an argument ensued. Let's go ahead and move this up a little bit here. And Austin then sucker punched him in the face and smashed his phone onto one of the bleachers. So this is a part here that, again, people are not discussing. Because the version of events that I heard about this incident first was that Carmelo stabbed Austin because they had a disagreement about who should be in the tent or whatever, and that it was unprovoked. But now you're hearing a different part of the story. And this part of the story, which is coming from the chief, says that Austin sucker punched Carmelo. So let's go on here. It goes on to say, Austin sucker punched him in the face and smashed his phone down onto one of the bleachers, causing the screen to crack during. The track rally did not have any assigned seating at the stadium for this event, and patrons and the suspect were free to sit wherever they wanted in the facility. Both teams then got into a mutual combat brawl after the white team punched the suspect in the face and Austin got stabbed while that altercation was taking place. So the suspect did not randomly stab Austin in the heart after he was told he was sitting in the wrong spot, as several bloggers online have inaccurately claimed. This is why I wanted to wait to cover this story. And there are a number of people who have covered this, and this is exactly what they're saying. That he just out of nowhere just stabbed him out of no reason. We'll get to the reason about the knife as well, because my big question was, why did you bring a knife to the school? We're going to get to all of that. Hold tight. Now it goes on and says here, the suspect is claiming self-defense, and a grand jury will determine if this was self-defense under Texas law. The suspect was charged with murder strictly as a preliminary measure before we knew any of the facts on what led to the stabbing. Let me say this again. The suspect was charged with murder strictly as a preliminary measure before we knew any of the facts on what led to the stabbing. So the problem that happened here is that they obviously gave a murder charge, but this is coming from the chief who was telling you that was prior to them finding out what led to the stabbing. So this is coming from the chief. Let's continue a little bit more here. It also goes on to say, the charges could not be reclassified or downgraded as more evidence is reviewed. We will not allow bad actors to try to create racial division in our community by spreading intentional, and it goes on to say. So this is coming from the chief, again, Chief Shilson from the Frisco Police Department. Now, that is another side of the story. But there's more information. Now, some of you may get upset because you want to believe the narrative that you want to believe. But whenever there's a legal situation, especially this is going to trial from what I see so far. They have to hear both sides. And it was interesting to me how people were so quick to just jump to defend one side or the other before they had more information. And I think the media did that on purpose. And it's sad that people fell for it. The media did this on purpose because that's what they wanted you to do. The media wanted you to be divided over this particular thing, and people didn't even have all the information. So something else that I think should be mentioned that also wasn't mentioned. This guy here, this is Introvert Rockstar. He shared this in his video. Listen to this part here that he shared that a lot of people also didn't know about.
People so eager to tell their side of the story. I mean, you don't see Carmelo's family on TV saying anything. Why the news not talking to them? Make it make sense. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the bullies have to be first to tell their side of the story. The bullies have to control the narrative first. And if you pay attention, ABC and Fox News was coaching this young man to tell his story because he can't lie for shit. And when has news outlets became the courtroom? Make it make sense. And then I said, wait.
Pause. this is a part here that I want to bring to everybody's attention. I said the same thing about the Luigi Mangione situation. Why is the media telling you if someone's guilty or not, and they haven't even had a trial? Why is the media doing this? You guys don't see what they're trying to do? It's just like, it's so obvious. Why is the media telling you that said person is guilty when people are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty when they have a trial? That's what the trial is for. But the media is declaring that people are guilty. I saw people fall for this under Luigi Mangione, and people are falling for it now under this Carmelo situation. So some of you need to get out of your feelings and just look at what the facts show. Let's continue.
You had media outlets posting negative pictures of Carmelo Anthony. You even had these type of black people posting those same negative pictures. And like I always tell y'all, in our community, we have some people, our people, they don't like themselves. Our people, they don't like their people. It is what it is. But when it comes to me, I'm riding for my people 100%. But I noticed something. None of them shared this picture of the twins. And how ironic that this is the Instagram page of Austin Metcalf. Let's read it. He said, I dare one of these to show up to the track meet today. It got 667 likes. Make that make sense.
So this is what he's pointing out that was on Instagram. And what we found out from this particular situation is that these people, apparently there was some type of beef between the two of them, right? So it's not like they were friendly, but there was some type of beef between the two of them in some way, shape, or form. From Carmelo's perspective, he says that he was bullied. From Austin's family's perspective, Austin didn't do anything wrong. But it's important that you hear everything. Now, we're going to get to this part here about the knife, because the one thing that I did say was this. And people said, why does he have a knife there? Yeah, you can't bring a weapon to a track meet. You can't do that. I mean, I ran track, I played sports. You can't do that. But the reason why people are saying that he may be able to get self-defense is because of this law. So now you're going to learn about Texas. Texas self-defense laws, stand your ground and castle doctrine. I just want to show you what the castle doctrine says. This is the really important part. Listen to this. And I don't care. People can get all in their feelings. I don't give a shit. I didn't make the law. So listen to what they say. Let me put here. Texas State Penal Code Section 9.31 states that persons who use force against another party when they reasonably believe that force is needed to protect them against another's use of force or attempts to use illegal force. Again, this is the Castle Doctrine for the state of Texas. Remember how Florida had the stand your ground law? Texas has something a little bit similar. So that's similar to what this is. What I thought was interesting about this law is reasonably believe, and that can be tricky. That people may use force against another party when they reasonably believe that the force is needed to protect them against another person's force. This is the issue here. Now, you can reasonably believe that someone is going to harm you, but a belief and an action are two different things. And I think this is where it gets kind of murky, because ultimately it comes down to this. People are going to have to decide whether or not the force that Carmelo used match the force that he received, if they felt like that was necessary force responded to the force that came at him. And at the end of the day, the people who are going to make that decision is a jury. It's not you, it's not me, it's not any of these other people, it's a jury. That's who makes that decision. So what his lawyer, Carmelo's lawyer, is doing is he is referring to this law in Texas. Now, I live in Massachusetts. I don't think we have this law. I've never heard this law here, but different states, different things. But his lawyer is pointing to this. The question here is reasonably believe, which can be a little loose, and the type of force that was used. Now, don't get me wrong. There is still going to be that question about the knife. Why was there a knife brought to a track meet? That is still an issue. But what I believe the lawyer is going to try to do is that the lawyer is going to try to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that for whatever reason, Carmelo felt that he had to have that to protect him. Or I don't know, maybe there was some threat that was made towards him prior to that event, personally or directly. I don't know. But what I do know is that Texas has that law, and the lawyer is looking at that, and the lawyer is saying that it was self-defense. The problem that you have with this case is a similar problem that people had with the Daniel Penny and the Jordan Neely situation. People are making it racial. People are voting for their side. I feel like this is OJ all over again. Like, people are getting in their feelings instead of looking at what the law says. And I think, let me put this up here. This guy said something here. And even in this video, I got to point to this because he's making the comparison between Carmelo Anthony and Daniel Penny. And I have to say this as well, different state, different law. New York has different laws than Texas. But listen to what he said.
You know what the difference between these two men is? One of them was assaulted before they turned to violence. The other one wasn't even talked to. One of them had to tell their assailant, "Put your hands on me again and find out what happens." The other one had to take his AirPods out, put the Soldier of Fortune magazine he was reading back into his little backpack, and walk across a subway car to choke someone out. One of them was defending themselves from violence. The other one was defending strangers against words. This is important, so listen up. I'm not defending what either of these men did. But if you defended one of them, you better fucking defend the other one. Because if you defended this one, but you're not defending this one, even though this one was actually attacked, guess what that makes you? Racist.
It's interesting the way that he did that. Yeah, I think that people need to wait and see how this plays out. But the reality is, one thing he doesn't mention, which I wish he would have mentioned in this video, 2 different states, 2 different things. New York versus Texas. New York has different laws than Texas has, right? So again, like I said, it looks like Carmelo's lawyer is going to try to use the stand your ground law to defend Carmelo. Now, I still have the same question that you do. Why bring a knife, right? Like, why did you bring a weapon to a track meet? Yeah, I still have that same thing. I think that in that particular situation, that is when you go to the coach, right? You go to your peers. You can, maybe not your peers, but you can go to your coach. And I don't know if that happened. That's what I'm saying. So we don't know. Maybe he did go to the coach. Maybe he did complain and say, hey, this is happening. I don't know. But we need to find out why he felt that it was okay for him to bring that knife to the track meet, because that wouldn't have been my response. But at the end of the day, I think people need to really look at the laws in Texas. Let's show that poll. Thank you. Well, this is interesting. Was Carmelo acting in self-defense? We have 1,494 votes. 34% say yes, 13% say no. 53% said, I don't know enough to say. Yeah, and I think that's where the majority of people stand right now. Like, even that did not take that poll, they just don't really know. They don't really know enough to say if he was self-defense or not. Like I said, more information probably will come out, but this story is getting a lot of buzz. Crazy stuff, guys. Okay, we are going to do call-in tonight after the show, but I did promise that I was going to make an address to the audience really quick, and that should be rather briefly, and we can get on over to call-in. And you can come on to call-in and tell me what you think about the story. Anywho, I just want to go ahead and put this out here. I've said this before on this show I think like maybe 2 years ago, maybe 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. But I think you guys may not know, or maybe you did. I don't know. If you're new, I don't know. Anyway, we're going to make this quick. For those of you who are online, I do want to make you very much aware that there are people who are operatives that are trying to divide Revolutionary Blackout Network. This has been going on for quite some time. It didn't just start yesterday. It's been quite a journey over the years, and they have done things in certain ways to try to pit us against each other. All of us have experienced that. And one of the easy targets is me. And the reason why I'm the easy target is because, as they have pointed out, that I have more subscribers for my channel than we do over at RBN. So I'm the one that people are heavily targeting. And it's been this way for quite some time. People have gone after my family. People have posted fake pictures of me from like years ago, pictures of my family members. People have posted my address, which isn't even the correct address, by the way. People have posted that type of information. And they started doing this a couple of years ago, and now they're doing this again. And one of the things that I have talked about on this show numerous times is that I come from a military family. I've made that very clear. And these people who are the operatives, who also are in similar situations, have family members in similar situations, they are coming after me because they are saying, you have family members that work for the military. You have family members that work for defense and da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da. And first of all, I want to say this. First of all, I am not the only podcaster that has family members that are in the military or work for defense. And they know that. And these people know that because I used to be in DM groups with them on Twitter. And they're not going after those people. They're coming after me. And the reason why they're coming after me is because I'm growing. And I want to say this. People don't always get the jobs that they want. When I worked at BU, that sure as hell was not my first, second, third, fourth, or fifth choice. That's where I could get work. And that's what I had to do to pay my fucking bills. And instead of them spending their time coming after the systems in place, coming after the capitalist system in place, coming after the systemic issues, the industry itself, they're attacking people who are workers. Now, I said I addressed this 2 years ago, but tonight I got something to say. One of these people in particular, who's female, I was going to show their names and everything on here. I'm not going to do that because then I thought about it. That's exactly what they want me to do. They want fucking attention. One of them in particular was revealed years ago on social media that she was connected to the CIA. This was revealed by herself, by the way. And people got upset and then they ran her ass off of there. Now she pops up 1 year later. This particular person this individual, this woman, spent time over the years sending suggestive photos of herself to male podcasters. And for the men who are listening, please listen. If there's anything that you take from me tonight is this. Anytime a woman starts sending you pictures of herself, suggestive photos of herself, and you ain't never met her in person, that's a fucking trap. Now, I noticed this years ago, and I knew she wasn't about shit. I knew she was an online activist. Because for all that revolutionary talk online, when it was time to get on the ground and get on the streets, when Rome would come to all these different cities and say, get on the ground with me and do tour for the poor, these people were nowhere to be found. This particular individual has a very rich family that does not like Black people. But you don't see me putting pictures and images of her family out there on the internet. So for all that radical and revolutionary talk that she has been doing online, when it comes time for the mission to do the work on the ground, she's nowhere to be found. We call them armchair activists. And I thought it was very interesting that from day one, this woman has been trying to tear up Revolutionary Blackout Network. I saw this shit early on and I never trusted that bitch. Early on. How do you take DMs that was sent to you from one person and you try to pit people against each other and you send it to somebody else? You do that if you're trying to tear up a group. How do you send pictures of yourself to people that you know are involved in relationships? You do that if you're trying to trap a motherfucker. My family is not perfect, and I am not perfect. But unlike you, I don't have to prostitute myself out to get attention from men. I ain't got to send photos showing my body parts to get attention. And that's all that you can do because you have a low self-esteem. You want to be a part of Black culture, but you're not Black. You want to be a part of Black culture, but you also want to be racist and tear down Black women. Some of them, these people are so fucking obvious. Some of them who I've seen in DM groups before, who they don't know that there's moles in their DM groups. So what they think they say is private is never private. Some of them I have seen in RBN live chats making comments like, why does Sabby have this many subscribers and RBN has this many? These people are there for division and division only. And what I'm trying to tell you guys is be aware of operatives. And I would hope if you guys were to see that, you would know what is being done. You would know what is being played. These people are agents. These people are operatives, and they are not about any real change. I've called it from day one. When we started the mutual aid chapters, all these people online were like, yeah, do this, do that. But the moment we got on the ground, silence. The moment we got on the ground and we were in their respective areas, they were nowhere to be found. Nowhere. Because they didn't want to do anything. Their main goal was division. And I don't believe that all of these people that say that they are post-duopoly are actually post-duopoly. I never believed that. Never did. And that's fine. You do you. But anytime you see people, these accounts online spending more time basically denigrating and attacking activists than they are the actual people in power in the current systems that are in place, these people are operatives. They don't really want change. I saw them tear down Julian Assange activists. Why the hell would you attack people who are protesting to free Julian Assange? And by the way, he did get freed. Why would you do that? Who does that? An op. So when these people say these things about me, I don't respond to these people. And this woman, people are asking, is she white? No, it's an Indian woman. This woman did this behind a block. I do call-ins on this show once a week, sometimes twice. I am not one of those podcasters that is unreachable. If you want to reach me, there are many ways to do so. My email address is in the description of my videos. You can call in and talk to me on call-in. If you have questions for me about my life, I am not unreachable. You can contact me directly, but that wasn't the point. The point was not to reach out to me. The point is to smear and to attack. And that's what these people are doing. And some of it, I think, is a little bit of jealousy. Instead of wagging your finger at me, instead of being mad at me for growing, maybe sit back and wonder how and why. You can say anything you want about me. People can say anything they want about me. I don't care. If you don't like me, I do not care. But what you can't say is that I didn't work my ass off. I've worked my ass off. I've worked my ass off since 2021. And there were people in independent media who helped me out, who gave me a platform to come onto where I could talk. And for some reason, and mainly women, these women, so freaking catty, that bothers them. Oh, she's getting too big. I got a problem. Oh my God, we need to go after her. She's doing too much. But I'm not pimping myself out via text message. I'm not asking men to contact me back. I don't have to take off my clothes. I don't have to show body parts to get people to hear what I have to say. Because I have a high self-esteem. You do that because you don't. So you can dislike me all you want. Fine. But when you come after my family, make sure you expose the truth about yours. Make sure you let people know how easy it is for you just to quit your job and not have another one lined up because your family is fucking loaded. And make sure you tell your so-called warriors online, especially the black ones, just how much your family hates black people. Why don't you tell them that shit? There are people who like you talking about doing something, but then once you actually start doing things on the ground, They don't like that. They don't actually want things to get done. And I will say this about the left, and then I'll break and we'll go to call in. This is another reason why the left doesn't win. Some of these people that are pretending to be left are infiltrators. There were infiltrators in the Black Panthers. Some of these people that you think is on your side and you think really want to work with you and want to get things accomplished, the moment you actually start making moves and you actually start doing something, they'll be the first ones to try to smear you and take you out. Now, a number of people online, they know who this person is. They know who these people are and what they're doing and the things that they're spreading about me. That's totally fine. I don't give a damn. I'm just letting all of you know. Because if something happens to me, you'll know where to look. I don't do armchair activism. I don't do online activism. I do mutual aid. I actually fucking help people. And for the people who are always online because they have no motherfucking life and are never going to show up when it's time to get out in the streets or it's time to actually do some fucking work, these people are ops. These people are there for division. And if you sit back and listen to these people, they will pull you down with them. Any questions you have for me, you can ask me directly. And a real woman would do that shit. I'll be back. Break real quick. Eric's going to come on. I'll be back and we'll do call in.
All right. Here we are. All right. This is the part of the show where I jump in from the background to the foreground. Eric T. Red here. I'm usually in the background, and Corey as well is in the background, trying to keep things running smooth. I got my Born to Code t-shirt and ready for action here. But yeah, I think we're going to, so this is the part of the show where we give Sabby a little break. She's actually creating the Zoom Hangout room that we call Call-In, because it used to be on Call-In. And then we'll be giving you the link. You'll also be able to reach it at sabbysabs2.com. But don't worry, we'll get to all that shortly. But first, we got some super chats in the queue. Let's see what we got. Thanks for this super sticker, Silver Beer Nuts. Appreciate you. Let's see. And some of these go back to the previous story too. Let's see. All right. And thanks for the super chat, Nexus Games. He says EVs are built on the backs of slaves, nothing green about them. But I just started a 3D print farm. All 20 machines are from China. All right. And Snork Y2K said he'll try to call in about the materials. Yeah, please do. Come on into the Zoom hangout. If I see in there Zork, we'll try to get you up soon, because I know you know about materials and things. Thanks. And thanks for the super chat, Yala Bite, who says, Sabby, we should never trust black politicians with light eyes, Booker and Jeffries. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's, there's like the story with AOC and with Schumer, and, this whole idea of like that, of AOC being this, insurgent, force that's going to come in and take out Schumer or something. I mean, you really just have to look at what they've been saying and what they've been doing, to know that no member of the Democratic Party, no member of the Republican Party is your friend. They work for the billionaires. It really is that simple. And so if any of these politicians want to show us something, the first thing they can show us is leaving the party and calling out the corruption in the major political parties. So it's not that hard really for them to be real. And, we're here waiting for them when they want to be real. Thanks for this super chat, Roger Meadows. I think he's talking about China, saying they'll beat us without launching one missile, just cut the supply chain. I hear Red Fox saying, you big dummy. Yeah, from the old Sanford and Son. Yep, you big dummy. I think that's what that one's from. Thanks, Roger. Thanks for this super chat, Simply C. who says, we have to wake up and see the world is enslaved. Please all watch Kim Iverson's interview with Jeff Berwick, or at least the movie Jones Plantation. And thanks for the super chat, Yin Yang Eclipse, with many symbols and support for Sabby. And thanks, Roger Meadows, who put in stand your ground, same law in Florida Zimmerman used to get up. And yeah, you know, we can talk about that Carmelo Anthony case in the Zoom hangout, where you can talk about that or any other subject you want. We like to hear from everybody. And I think we got plenty to talk about tonight. So this should be interesting. Thanks for the super sticker, Gina Viola. Appreciate that. Thanks, Charlie Mack, who says, F the ops and haters. Love you, Sabby. RBN for the win. And thanks for this super chat from Official People's Party, who says, I love you, Sabby. You are a real folk populist. And thanks very much for this generous super sticker, James Bondage. Appreciate that. And thanks for this super chat, Star Fury, who says opposition only comes when you are winning. Yeah, it's like they say, you know, if you're taking a lot of flack, you must be over the target, right? Thanks, Baby Ethernet, who says torched by Sabby. And thanks, All One Same, for this super chat. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win, quoting Mahatma Gandhi. And thanks for the super sticker, James Stark. Appreciate that. Appreciate you. And Roger Meadows, thanks for the super chat. It says, guys, stop guessing. It's no one you know. Trust me. And I think we got a bit over here on the Rumble rant. See if we can bring that up. There we go. And this too goes back to the earlier stories. Thanks for this tipped comment, Goo81, who says, Macron getting involved is no good. He was also guarantor to Lebanon ceasefire. Also, he just insulted Africans to pray for them as if they can't take care of themselves. Burkina Faso president called him out. And we got a few from Goo in here, I think. Yeah, he says Macron being involved is not good, as he is also guarantor of Lebanese ceasefire. He also recently said, it's kind of this similar to the earlier one, but yeah, like Africans can't take care of themselves. We got a couple more in here, though. Let's see. Actually, he's kind of saying the same thing, but thanks for the super chat. Let's see if he's got a different one down here. Go through what we got here on the Rumble. All right. And also, thanks for this one, Goo81, who says, sorry for the repeat rants. My iPhone is acting weird, but you deserve the donations. Appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Goo81. And I think that gets us through the super chats.
Yeah. And these people, by the way, which I should say, these are not people you guys know. These are people that are online activists. They're not like, it's not near Tandon. No, it's not someone that these are online activists, people that claim to be, oh, I'm the more left than you, and I'm da-da-da, and I'm pure, and I'm da-da-da-da. And this is why the left doesn't win. This is exactly why. There are people that I've tried to bring over to leftist like positions, and they support the policies, but then they get into like these leftist circles online and they say, I can't do this because these people are telling me that I'm not left because I'm not pure enough. And by pure enough is stupid shit. Like, you not left because you eat meat. You're not left because you don't drive an electric vehicle. And a lot of these people that are making these, assertions, these are people that are really well off financially. The individual that I was talking about, this online activist person, this woman comes from a very wealthy family. And I mean wealthy. So she, it's a lot to say. When you have those type of resources, you can do more than what I do. Why you don't do anything with your time except spend it online talking about other activists. So whenever you see people online and they're spending more time attacking activists, instead of attacking institutions, instead of attacking people who are in positions of power, these people are operatives. And to the men, I say it again, anytime a woman that you have never met is sending you suggestive photos of herself, that is a trap. Do not fall for that BS at all. We can get into call-in.
All right. We do have Sabby Sabs 2 set up.
So the link is pinned to the top of the chat. You guys know how this works. I'll open it on the stream.
Let us
go ahead and do that. Let me in. Yeah, they turned me loose. I was like Loverboy. Turn me loose. Turn me loose. Turn me loose. You gotta do. Okay, so the call-in link is pinned to the top of the chat, or you can also join the link by clicking on going to sabbysabs2.com. For those of you that come into the show a little bit later, you can catch it there. But we're gonna go ahead and do it. Yeah, it's open.
Oh, there it goes. All right. Oh man, let me.
I just got to make
I
you.
think everybody rushed in at once.
Eric, I'll make you a co-host.
All right, very good. Then I will see all you in there.
Let go. All right, guys. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.